We're live.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Inside Movies Galore. I am your host, David Streggy, and today we are continuing our mustache matinee themed month. And we are going with a choice that I chose for this month, and it got voted in. But it is the 1991 Steven Spielberg directed Hook, starring Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Julia Roberts, among others. Written by J.M. Barrie, James V. Hart, and Nick Castle. Did the screenplay. So, but let me just say what IMDb says about the film. When Captain James Hook kidnaps his children, an adult Peter Pan must return to Neverland and reclaim his youthful spirit in order to change his old enemy. Or challenge his old enemy. So, let us... I meant challenge. But in any case, let us go with first impressions. And I'm going to go to my right. So I'm going to start with you, Jake. Why don't you tell me, was this a first time watch for you?
No. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure I could even say what my first impression was, because I have definitely seen this one a few times over the years. I'm reasonably sure that we might have even seen it very shortly after its release. And I probably saw it many times when I was younger. It's been a while up until, strangely enough, we decided out of the blue to watch this about 3 months ago. But I think before that, it had probably been, I don't know, 3-4 years maybe. It's one that I see periodically. It hasn't aged as well as I would like, but it definitely still has very strong nostalgia factor. A lot of it has to do with I grew up on the Disney Peter Pan. That was also a big part of my childhood. I was always a fan of this story generally. I have eventually gotten around to reading the original book by J.M. Barrie, which is different, but it's a good read. But overall, and of course, there have been some other excellent ones. Pan was a underrated movie. Finding Neverland was a pretty awesome movie. So there have been a lot of times I've come back to this and it has always been one that I've really liked. I've also always been a very big fan of Robin Williams, and this movie is stacked with incredible actors. You got Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins, Maggie Smith, et cetera, et cetera. You got some really, really high talent involved, plus Spielberg, and you misstated saying the screenplay was by Nick Castle, but he did work on the original screen story. And think about that, though. The Hook could have been a Nick Castle film.
IMDb does say that it was the screenplay.
Screen story. It's he helped write the treatment, but that was 15 years before the movie actually got made. And there were some other what might have beens that I read about on IMDb that I've just some of them are pretty great.
I think originally they were planning on doing this with Michael Jackson as Peter Pan.
Yes, they wanted to do a musical with Michael Jackson. And apparently John Williams co-wrote a whole bunch of songs that will never see the light of day. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole bunch of what could have been with this, which is, but And as we go along, I'll talk about the elements that I think maybe didn't age as well as some of the others. Some things get better as you get older. And overall, though, it's still a very, very entertaining film. It is one of Spielberg's most definitively family-oriented films. Um, Started a long-term friendship that he had with Robin Williams. Definitely a whole lot of really cool stuff here, and always fun to revisit, I think.
Okay. I'm gonna skip over to Randy. Welcome back to the show. Why don't you tell me? Was this a first time watch for you?
Oh, definitely not. I've been, big on Spielberg ever since I could remember. Whenever I formed memories. I saw this when I was 6 years old, and I definitely remember bits and pieces of it in theaters. I remember seeing a teaser for it somewhere, and it was like the hook in like a darkened room or something, and I think it like sparks and basically, Christmas 1991, and I saw the movie. I loved it. I remember bothering my parents to go to a store and buy the VHS. I think it was the night before it was released in stores, but I just had to have it. I wanted to have it, and it just I got it eventually, but I really wanted it that night. But it was this is one of my favorite Spielberg films, one of his most underappreciated films. It definitely is very family friendly, and I really wish it got more attention because it's not that bad. I don't know why people hate it so much. It's one of my
for older generation. I think if you saw this movie as an adult and you didn't have kids like Siskel and Ebert, then you probably didn't like it.
Yeah. But
I've always been puzzled myself about why it gets so much hate. It really puzzles me.
It's not bad. I mean, it's a little goofy, but it's perfect for kids.
Great.
And also had a great toy line, I must say.
Okay. Heading over to you, Tammy. Was this a first time watch for you?
No, this was one of the ones that I told you I didn't meet my father until I was 12. So he went through a whole bunch of movies to see if I like this and I like that or like that. And this was one of them. So I definitely liked it the first time I watched it. And as I got older, I appreciated it even more because I actually do like Robin Williams very much as an actor. And my dad and I have always talked about that. Their choice for Robin Williams as Peter Pan was the best choice because he pulled it off perfect.
Okay. Is that it for then your first impression of this?
Yes.
Okay. Then I will go over to you, Dane. Why don't you? Was this a first time watch for you?
No, it was not. Now I will say I have a weird experience with this film because I did not grow up with it. And I saw it. This is what's so eerie about it. I saw it approximately 1 week before Robin Williams' tragic suicide.
Wow.
And it made it especially eerie because this movie is all about the fear of death and mortality. And yeah, that's kind of what's at the heart of the Peter Pan story is
his
the
final
fear of
line,
aging
too.
and death. Yeah, exactly. It was just a weird synchronicity of events because it was definitely on my mind when he died. And and again, just the fact that the themes are about those things, it's just, I always think of how eerie that was. But that being said, as a film in and of itself, I think there's a lot of really good stuff in this film. The stuff that's good in it is pretty strong. Problem with the movie is that I think it's got some serious pacing problems, and I think So it's almost 2.5 hours. It really doesn't need to be that. Like, and I watched it this time again, trying to say, okay, if you just did another edit on this thing, could that do the trick? The problem is the way that the script is written. I'm not really sure you could, because a lot of the things that happen do take you to the next place, and it's not like it's particularly extraneous, the stuff that you can just delete, but it's in terms of just what's already shot. I think in order to do it justice, you'd have to basically do another draft of the script to make it work. And if you were really judicious about things, you could get this down to like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the most. Because especially like there are certain sections that just go on way too long and are not interesting, and there's a lot of repetition, particularly like in the climax, particularly like when we're first getting introduced to Neverland and the Lost Boys and stuff. There's just a lot of stuff that's like, okay, we get it. You've said this already. You don't have to say it a million more times. But again, the stuff that's good in it is really, really good. The two main actors are really strong, and the psychological aspects of Peter Pan are done pretty well. I would have liked it if the kind of stupider moments had been cut down, and if the overall pacing had been tightened up, because then the good stuff would have shown even stronger. And there's a lot of good stuff in this film. And there's just a lot of stuff, like Jake said, that has not aged particularly well, and they like scream of the time in which the movie was made, which, not too surprising, but it's just more funny. Like skateboards and basketball in Neverland, really, it's just like,
Right.
wow, this is such an obviously early 90s movie.
Flying on Pan Am.
And literally everything about Rufio is like, could you get any more 90s?
I don't think you
But
really
again,
could.
I don't think, like, the only way you could get any more 90s is if it was like a late 90s movie and it was like one of the Backstreet Boys or something. But I think that's part of why, like, for those who did grow up with it, I think that's part of why they like it. Same with, like, 80s kids love the fact that movies of that decade are so drenched in the pop culture. But again, the stuff that's good in it is really good. I think it could have used a couple more script rewrites to really get it down to its essence, because there's just a lot of stuff that drags in this.
Okay. Going over to you, Brandon, why don't you tell us, was this a first time watch for you?
No. I watched this not long after it came out. I remember they had one heck of an advertising campaign for this. And I was an avid comic reader at the time.
Marvel Comics?
Yep. Matter of fact, at around 12 years old when this came out, that was when I was first getting into comics. I remember at the time, I think that was the first appearance of Carnage was around that time. Boy, it tells you how old this that was. And I remember seeing the advertisements. You just had the big hook, and it really just made you go, "Ooh, what's that?" And I used to think, "Oh, how clever." And as a kid, I really got into a lot of the elements, and I'll admit, a lot of the pacing elements tend to go away when you're a child watching it. As an adult, I can definitely understand, especially if you're watching it as an adult and thinking of it as an adult-oriented film. But I can say, remembering it as a child and going through that lens, I thought that it all hit very well as a child's film, with some elements that could appeal to adults. And Spielberg did an excellent job with that. Loved the acting with Robin Williams. Liked a lot of the child actors did a very excellent job. Just loved the imagination and creativity that they did in crafting their version of Neverland. All of the little weapons that they utilized. Like at that battle at the end with the pirates, and just the character of Hook and Shmi together. They also just very amazing casting all the way around. I really did enjoy the film, and it was a great retread. I haven't watched this movie in years, so it was kind of good to go back to that. It was just kind of a great thing. Now, I admit, without the nostalgia or without looking at it, like if I first approached this as an adult, I probably would agree with Dane that the pacing is off. But looking at this from though I think as a kid, looking at it, which is who the film was designed for, I thought that the pacing was just right for that.
Okay. Heading over to you, Krull. Why don't you tell us, was this a first-time watch for you?
No, I saw it when it first came out. Shortly after. I don't think it was in the theater, but it was shortly after. So I was a young adult. I'm probably around 1920. I liked the pacing. It didn't really bother me. I just enjoyed it. I've always thought younger, so I'm mature, but I have a younger side, so I always take things with just watching the way they are and enjoy things. So pacing didn't bother me at all. I absolutely love Robin Williams. Ever since the first time I seen him on Happy Days, and then there's Mork and Mindy, and then like every movie he's ever been in. Actually, the second time I saw this movie was right after he passed away. I went and binged a bunch of Robin Williams movies that I could find, and this is one of them. It's definitely Julia Roberts is great as Tinkerbell. Her entrance was hilarious. It's basically beating the heck out of him and trying to get him to remember, hey, you're Peter Pan. And the whole movie is great. I mean, I'm watching it this time, and it's some of it I was like, oh yeah, like I forgot that, I forgot this. So even though it hadn't been that long since I'd seen it the second time, it's still, you forget things. But it was definitely an enjoyable movie to watch again, and definitely have nostalgia. And I also grew up loving Peter Pan's story, the Disney version and different versions, the Sandy Duncan version and stuff of Peter Pan. So I have always had
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I've always had a love for Peter Pan. So this was definitely a great watch for me. Like I said, love Robin Williams. Spielberg, I've probably seen just for all of his films as well, and love his films. So definitely a great movie overall. And of course, Dustin Hoffman always kills it.
Okay. Is that it for your first impression then?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Heading over to you, Forrest. Was this a first-time watch for you?
Far from it. I saw this movie when it first came out when I was 4 years old. It's funny because it's because everybody's because a lot of you guys were talking about how the pacing wouldn't bother a child, but actually as a 4-year-old, because this movie was nearly 2.5 hours long, I ended up like my dad ended up taking me and my sister out with about, we caught a good chunk of the movie, but most of it, but like we left with about 10 minutes still left to go because this was just such a long movie. And couple of times, me and my sister were like 4 and 3 at the time. Mm-hmm. But I did get it on, but eventually, but it ended up becoming but like within months, after it came out on video, and which on that note, this is one of those movies that I don't know how I don't already own a copy of it, given how many times I've seen it. It's one of those movies interesting. It's one of those movies that if it's on a streaming service or if it's on television, I will definitely stop and watch it. It's my first, probably my first foray into Steven. It's probably my earliest memory of watching a Steven Spielberg movie, as well as Robin Williams. I had already seen reruns of Mork and Mindy on Nick at Night by the time this movie come out. But this is probably the first major role of his that I really remember. Same with Dustin Hoffman as Hook himself. I think with Dustin Hoffman's Hook, if there were a Mount Rushmore of scene-chewing villains, it would be Dustin Hoffman's Hook, Jack Nicholson's Joker, Alan Rickman's Sheriff of Nottingham, and Al Pacino's Big Boy Caprice from Dick Tracy.
That would be interesting. Which is kind of interesting
I
because
like that.
Hoffman was sort of the wallflower in Dick Tracy.
Right? It's become, but yeah, it was. I agree, but yeah, I think it actually for me it actually flows a lot better as an adult than it did for me as a kid. Like I don't know, like I mean, yeah, although I do agree, there maybe are some pacing, maybe some pacing issues. But yeah, I think it's definitely one of Spielberg. It's definitely definitely a movie that you can watch with the whole family. I don't really get all the hate for it, and I think I think all the critics who gave it who panned it back in 1991 could go in the boo box.
They fan.
The Boo Box.
Well-
yeah, and I actually did own a decent amount of merchandise from this movie. I had a few of the McDonald's Happy Meal toys from it, and I actually have the Super Nintendo game in my video game collection. But yeah, it's definitely been a mainstay. It's a childhood favorite and still a mainstay favorite of mine that I have to watch. That I watch at least once or twice a year. And as far as the Peter Pan story, it's as far as like, because everybody seems to have gotten to it through teasers. For me, like I grew up with the Peter Pan story, the Disney version, as well as the Mary Martin version.
Mhm.
Which I'm sure if any kid in the 80s and 90s
Right.
had that version, yes.
Well,
Yes,
I know that I've
definitely.
seen the Mary Martin version. I've also seen the Kathy Rigby version.
I've never seen that version.
And then, of course,
The
there
Mary
were, go ahead.
Just to make sure I'm remembering correctly, the Mary Martin one was the one that was based on the stage play, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, definitely had that tape.
Yeah.
But those two versions I grew up with. So like watching this a lot as a small child. So by the time that they were marketing Hook on television, I knew immediately I wanted to see Hook. I got hooked on Hook.
So here's some interesting little tidbits there. Well, I want to make clear that I wasn't, panning the movie or anything, because again, I think the stuff that's good in it is really, really good.
Of course.
I just think it. Go ahead.
Actually, because you were mentioning how you had watched it around the time that Robin Williams had passed away, and a lot of what you were saying, that definitely has crossed my mind when he talks about, like, for me, the final line when he says to live would be the biggest adventure. Like thinking about that now in the context, now after he's passed away, it does feel a little.
It's eerie.
Well,
But
in
then,
the movie,
what I realized about that when that happened was I looked back at Robin Williams' career and I looked back at his stand-up and I was like, geez, his whole career was about death and the fear of death. Like if you really examine his film choices and his actual jokes and everything, it's all about that. So it's very eerie in that context. Now, granted, all of us, every single human being's life is measured on an x-axis of time, and so death is always, like it or not, it's always in the back of our minds because it's going to happen to every one of us. With him, it was so unexpected that it did sort of bring it to the forefront a lot more, those themes. But yeah, I didn't want people to think I was panning it because I wasn't. I just was. I do think that there was room for improvement. But I know Spielberg himself said that he was disappointed with the final cut of the thing. And I can understand why, because again, I think there's just a lot of places where if they'd have just rewritten some things, then they could have whittled down the repetition. They could have whittled down some of the stupider moments. But I think part of why I didn't grow up with the movie was because I remember my dad was really not a Robin Williams fan, like pretty seriously not. And, I still watch plenty of stuff with him in it, but just, certain things didn't really get in the repertoire, oddly enough. And I do really like James V. Hart as a screenwriter because he was the one who adapted Bram Stoker's Dracula, and he did Muppet Treasure Island as well, which I thought were incredible, and also based on public domain sources. Um, the one thing I'll say, because I do know that this film was very heavily, and from what I gather, successfully marketed with the hook itself as the main image, and obviously the title hook is a single word,
You
single
could say that
syllable
was its main hook.
hook. Indeed, you could. Well, but
Yeah.
that's also well, but that's
I think
also
there's been a lot of
also
pan
kind of
pumps tonight.
that's also kind of where I'm going with it, though, because one thing I was disappointed with about the film was that, yeah, okay, so you hear the name, the word Hook, you hear that you think it's gonna be about Captain Hook, and I kind of, when I was like maybe middle school age was when actually no, the book came out in 1995. The Wicked, Gregory Maguire's Wicked, the book came out then, and I remember my dad was a big fan of it. And he kind of got a reputation for being like the darker, more mature fairy tale guy, with his versions of Cinderella and A Christmas Carol and stuff like that, and they usually centered around the villains and made them sympathetic and all that kind of stuff. So I heard Hook and I thought, oh, this is going to be the story of Peter Pan from Captain Hook's perspective, where he's the good guy, and and he's like a tragic figure or something. And that's not what this movie is about at all. And
I
the
always thought that they
name
should
doesn't
do
help
one
that at
like
all,
that.
because again, you think that's going to be. Yeah, well, and you think that's what it's going to be based on the title. Now, granted, the actual story of an adult Peter Pan having to learn to be Peter Pan again is a perfectly fine story. That's a great story. It's just the title there's always a mismatch in my brain because I'm like, that should be what the Captain Hook movie is called.
You know,
It
Well,
should be
I wonder.
where Captain Hook
let's
is a
finish
tragic
first
figure.
impressions first.
Okay, yeah.
And if
yeah.
Peter Pan himself is a little. Yeah, if Peter Pan's a little shit, to him, and so because really Peter Pan does a lot of villainous things in the story.
Yeah.
Right.
I was gonna say in the middle of the movie, we're going back to talking about death. He says, Peter Pan goes, "Oh, death shall be a great adventure," and then Hook is like, "It's the greatest adventure." So
Do we have first impressions left?
Yes, me.
Then
Oh.
let's get to that. Yes.
So I was 7 years old when I saw this film. I actually did see it in the theater. I do not see any pacing that's wrong with this film. I think that it's just fine the way it is, and I don't think we got a whole lot of swashbuckling films in the 90s entirely.
Cutthroat Island, but that
Yeah.
says Rocco.
But this one to me outswanked that one to me. By a long shot. I mean, Robin Williams. There's no one else who could have played him at that point in time, at least in my mind, as a grown-up Pan. I, for years afterwards, didn't realize that Dustin Hoffman was, in fact, the one who played Hook. I mean, he played it so damn well as the character. And whenever I look at him on screen, you almost don't see it as him, but you do. Once you really look at him,
Yeah,
Right.
he's not a very Dustin Hoffman-ish character.
Yeah.
And really,
And
when you see Captain Hook in your mind, Dustin Hoffman does not leap to mind. Like when like early, if it was like early '90s, okay, who are you going to cast as Captain Hook? Mine would have immediately gone to Tim Curry. But Dustin Hoffman in the role, you're like, you know what? He makes it work somehow.
Although
Yeah, I had to look.
Tim Curry, because around the time this movie came out, Tim Curry was voicing Captain Hook on Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to agree with you, Dave, that I didn't realize it was Dustin Hoffman myself for probably the first couple of years that I was watching this.
I mean, I was an adult when I saw it, and I don't think I realized it was him because, I mean, this time I had to. I mean, I knew it was him, and I remember looking, going, "Oh yeah, it is him." Like you have to really, really look, even though you know it's him.
It's the makeup. It's the makeup and the.
Yeah, they do such a great job, and he does such a great job with the acting. You really believe he's this villainous comeback.
And let's not forget Bob Hoskins as.
Oh, he's great.
What about Smee?
Actually, also not quite coming across as a Bob Hoskins type.
No, not really.
He kind of disappeared for the because for me, I largely associate Bob Hoskins with as Eddie Valiant and as Mario than I do Smee, and he just really and I feel like he really disappeared into the role with this one too.
I think I'm more in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's when I think of Bob Hoskins. So.
Oh yeah.
No love for Mona Lisa.
What?
What?
Huh? the film Mona Lisa that he was in.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't know it.
I don't know if I've seen it.
I haven't seen it.
I knew most people wouldn't get that. That's why I said that.
Well, when you said
I know the film, but it's not one that sticks in my mind for some reason.
Let's go into some of the plot here. So in the very beginning, we see that there is a school play going on, and I gotta say, while the play was going on, I would hate if a teacher were to coach me what I had to say, especially if I probably knew my lines at that age. To be honest,
but kids at those ages, they didn't tend to know their lines or bother to even remember them. And also, I think the thing that struck me, and I think it was a great decision now as an adult, so that's the difference actually as an adult versus a child, because it always bothered me as a kid that Peter Pan is traditionally played by a woman, and of course, but as an adult,
I still don't really.
I love the nod as an adult, having Peter Pan played by one of the female students.
Yeah,
I do think that that's a great nod to that cinematic history. But as a child, I wasn't going to get that. I was like, "But that's a boy. Why are you having the girl play the boy?"
I was the same way. As a kid, seeing women playing Peter Pan, like, why do they have women playing Peter Pan? Weird.
I don't really remember how that started.
Pan and you got men as Edna Turnblad.
Well, I mean, technically, traditionally, when you wanted to display a youthful child back in the day, you always used a female actor, and they still do this in voice acting to this day.
Yep.
When you play when you have male children, you almost always use a female actress. Yep. And
I would say
I don't know,
Bart Simpson
like Bart Simpson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just don't know how I feel about it entirely, but I understand. I understand it now, at least logically. But there's always that part of it, like, oh, I'd love to. It's like, you could have easily had a male student in the as far as a little school playing a child.
It doesn't bother me.
I think a male student works as a child.
It doesn't bother me in voice acting.
See, I'm going to be honest. I know it. I know it now, but I didn't pick up when I was a kid that it was a girl opposite. Obviously, Wendy is played by a girl, but I didn't quite pick up on that it was a girl. It didn't jump off the screen.
It didn't jump off the screen for me.
Register with me.
See, I'll have to rewatch it now because I always thought it was a boy that was playing it. But I guess if you look really closely, you can see the girl.
And we might as well go ahead and use this as a chance to give a shout out for Amber Scott, who plays Maggie. This is her only acting credit. And I will go so far as to say she did a great job as an actress, but as a screen presence, she's just delightful in almost every scene she's in. and it's kind of a shame she didn't do anything else.
Right. I'm looking at recent photos of her, and she looks like she could be. She looks like she's got a face for. She still has a face for the camera.
Right. And her co-star Charlie Korsmo also disappeared from acting. Although we talked a little bit about that when we did Dick Tracy.
Yeah,
he had about 5 or 6 high-profile roles. Dropped off the page for 5 years. Came back for Can't Hardly Wait, and then basically left and became a lawyer.
Actually, he did,
which is kind of ironic.
Actually, he did make a return. Actually, he did make a return to acting a few years ago in some indie movie. But according to him, he only did it as a favor to a friend.
Yeah, Chained for Life. I see that there. But yeah, it's kind of interesting given that his father plays a lawyer in this one. That ended up being his life's path.
Well, yeah, and Robin Williams as Peter Panning plays a corporate lawyer who basically, according to his son, blows people out of the water.
Yes,
he gets a phone call during this play that it kind of is kind of pivotal for some of the story because he cannot stop answering the phone.
Yes, he is
when
that
he's supposed
guy.
to be with family.
He's that guy.
But he ends up scheduling a meeting the next morning, which is apparently the same day as the biggest game in his son's life, and he ends up missing it. The next day, but there is a fundraiser that he is supposed to be going to that has his mother-in-law, who just so happens to be Wenda Moira Angela Darling. And he ends up showing up to that. So is there anything that anybody wants to say about these adjoining scenes?
Well, I want to mention the scene on the plane when she shows a picture of Jack made a picture of the family with the plane crashing and everyone having parachutes except for Dad because he missed the baseball game. So Jack was a little bit upset with them.
And she's so cheerful with presenting it too, and it's like
she was like, "Do you realize that Daddy's dying in this?"
You gotta love that. You gotta love that.
And the dad says he goes and asks him about it, and he goes like,
"Gotta love that
I have a parachute."
Airplane.
And there's some little Easter eggs in that scene too. I mean, it's Peter Pan. They're flying on Pan Am, also
which
Dustin
many
Hoffman
nowadays wouldn't exist.
Well, Pan Am I think went out of business right before the movie came out, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they did.
That's kind of funny.
And you had Dustin Hoffman voicing the pilot.
Yeah. Which also does play into tradition with this because traditionally Hook and Mr. Darling are always played by the same actor. So since they didn't have Mr. Darling here, having him voice the pilot and saying, "This is your captain," I think that was a pretty fun little thing.
Actually, for those
you gotta love the pre 9/11 humor there with the plane going down and with the fact that he's banging the baseball around on the windows. It's like, yeah, right. That kid
wouldn't happen today.
That kid would be shipped off to Guantanamo, never to be heard from again.
Hey, Cammy, you were saying something, weren't you?
Yeah, I thought it was, when Robin Williams, the father showed the child the picture, he goes, "Well, how come everybody's got a parachute but me?" And he goes, "What do you think?" And he just said it like that, like, "Oh, matter of fact."
Right.
You missed my game, you deserve to die.
Just as an aside, for those who played the video game, one of the things I thought was interesting, and I didn't get as a child, but in the Super Nintendo, you actually played the young version of Peter Pan. But as the Nintendo version, you played Robin Williams as
Mhm.
Peter Pan, and I always thought that was interesting how they did that interchange. I don't know if any of y'all also saw
I
that
remember
as video
playing.
gamers.
I remember playing those simultaneously from game system to game system. I was like, yeah, I guess the Robin Williams can't be any super anymore.
Actually, I mean, it's been a while since I played the Super Nintendo version, but if I remember correctly, you start out as Peter Banning, and you can power up into Peter Pan.
See, and I never actually played the
I,
Super Nintendo version other than to test it out.
That
And with
sounds
me, whenever
right.
I tested it out, it was always as the Peter Pan character.
well, so here's something interesting here. So, yeah, I think you're right with the upgrade to Peter Pan from Peter Banning. Now, I love the naming there. You know that I like where it starts off, where he's the furthest thing from Peter Pan that could possibly be, and that one thing that it really got right, this story really got right, was the idea that Peter Pan is more than just a person and a boy who never grows up and flies and all that. It's also a state of mind. You know that it's thinking happy thoughts, and it's reconnecting with that side of yourself that's youthful and isn't afraid of life, and um weighed down by life's concerns and that kind of stuff. So I think they really got that right. And then the other thing, I remembered, I kind of got introduced to this film formally by the back when I watched the Nostalgia Critic like religiously when I was like in my early 20s. I remembered the review that he did, and there were definitely moments that stuck out to me every time I watched the movie since then. But one of them was, the "I'll be there, my word is my bond," and then his interjection was, "By that
Yeah.
I mean and by that I mean I'm lying to you, and this will be a focal point of the movie."
Yeah.
Well, as the kid says, yeah, you're
Junk
junk
bond.
bond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Which, how the hell does
mean,
a kid know what a junk bond is?
Mhm.
He might have picked it up and just thought it sounded cool. I mean,
But
just
and
Peter
let's
Pan.
let me
there is
Yeah.
definitely moments that set this up for him later in when he gets to Neverland, and like the cell phone draw.
Right.
Did y'all realize that was that big
Oh
box
yeah.
Motorola?
Oh yeah. I mean that was but that's how they looked like back then.
Right.
So and you
Right.
had to be rich to afford ones that small back in '91.
That's small. Yeah.
I
He
mean,
was
those
a
were
lawyer, so
positively tiny
Right.
for '91.
Right.
And I remember watching this, going to the character of Jack, since we're kind of touching on him. It's kind of interesting because I can see it from both ways, and I don't know how it would have been if I first watched this as an adult. So those of you who have, that might be good to interject with, just your opinions. But me as a kid, I totally understood why Jack was being bratty as heck, because
Dustin's ready, by the way.
yeah. So
Cool.
I understand why he was being bratty because again, it makes sense. I mean, he's being ignored. His father's constantly lying to him. Of course, you're going to start acting out. Of course, you're not going to trust your father or obey. As an adult, I could see watching this and going, he's just an annoying kid. And but I'm not sure. Like, for those of you who watched this first as an adult, did you look at Jack as more of an annoying kid and less understood, or were you able to get
Definitely
that from the
not,
beginning?
actually, because a lot of his feelings feel like justifiable. Like you understand why he would have those perceptions. And even as an adult, it's kind of like, yeah, I can understand. Like, yes, Captain Hook is manipulating him, but you understand why it works, and it feels very organic.
So why don't we go ahead and ask you, Dustin? Was this a first time watch for you?
I did not see this when it came out, although I was alive when it came out, and I even had a handful of the toys. I remember the one that we never found that I really wanted was the Swiss Army hook. If anyone, I don't think it actually made an appearance in the movie.
I remember that. No, there was a lot of Hook and Peter Pan variants on that line.
Yeah, well, we never found it, but I always wanted that toy. But we had like the raft and a bunch of stuff.
I had the sword.
Yeah,
we never saw the sword actually. But anyway, so I mean, I saw this when I was maybe 10, 12, sometime later. There is a weird story I have about watching this on TNT. So during one of the commercial breaks, there was a commercial that came on. I forgot what the first part of the phrase was, but it was an ad to go to like priest school, and it was serve the Lord, be a priest. And for some reason, TNT aired that ad like I think I counted 17 times in a row during one commercial break. And so my memory of Hook is kind of tainted with that because it was very bizarre. And I think at some point I was shouting at the TV, "Fine, I'll be a priest. Just get back to the movie."
Mm-hmm.
It was
Actually,
pretty wild.
Though oddly enough, I was the same age as you when I saw this film, so it's kind of funny in that way.
I mean, I saw it many years after. This would have been like 2001-ish. Probably.
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to actually hop off, but
okay.
Any final thoughts before you leave?
Yeah, guys. So I just want to mention that this is one of my absolute favorite John Williams scores. Pan's theme or the flight theme, they're very triumphant, and I basically consider this tied with Jurassic Park as my favorite Williams score.
Okay.
This is an excellent moving score. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so perfect. But yeah, I love this movie. It's a child Hook classic, and I really wish that more people appreciate it like us. And I think it's a perfect movie to show our kids. I mean, I don't have a kid yet, but if you guys do, I think this is at the top of the list for me to show a kid. To get them interested in quality film, and especially Spielberg. But I want to thank you all for having me on tonight, and I'm so sorry, but I have work tomorrow early, so yeah,
not a problem.
I'll see
thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, I'm planning on doing a 30th anniversary movie screening party of Hook through Zoom on my YouTube channel. So if anyone's interested, you are more than welcome.
Okay. Cool.
Be there.
Good deal.
All right, guys. Right. Thanks again.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Hi.
And anyway, so that first time I saw it was a little bit tainted by the weird commercial experience, but overall, I really enjoyed it, and this is a pretty great movie, as we were just discussing. So, kind of wish I'd seen it like in theaters when I had the opportunity, because I'm sure it would have been even more exciting.
Yeah, I was 7 when I saw it in the theater. This was actually one that I actually did get to see in the theater. I think I
basically got to see Jurassic Park and Power Rangers in theaters when I was younger, and that was pretty much it.
Right. This one for me was sandwiched between a Dustin Hoffman film, Dick Tracy, and a Spielberg film, Jurassic Park. But I don't think I did see this one. I really would have loved to at the time. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because I was the same age as you, Dustin, seeing it. It was just when I was 12 was when it came out. So
yeah, I think I was like 5. I think I was like 5 when it came out.
So as far as plot,
I did see Jurassic Park. It's kind of funny. When I saw Jurassic Park, that's my first real memory of like seeing a movie in a theater. I saw it at a drive-in, and it played with the Flintstones movie, which I don't remember a damn thing about.
That's an
Best
interesting.
movie of its year.
So it just made me think of that. And it's like I saw it with some other movie, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure that other movie is terrible.
Well, as far as plot goes, we were just arriving at the
Right.
home of Wendy Darling.
And
So,
our wonderful first meeting with Toodles. It's snowing! Slam.
Just after they're talking about how
I
polite
lost-
they are in England.
Yes.
And then, of course, you got the other lady who just screams and
Yes, Liza.
does the whole chokehold drag.
Yeah.
And
remember
then
that.
of course you get Toodles on the floor. I've lost my marbles.
Poor
Yes.
Toodles.
and that's when Robin Williams kind of goes over and says, "Hey, I thought he was supposed to be in a home." But we get that classic scene where Wendy appears at the stairs in the darkness, and she calls down and says, "Hello, boy."
I loved how
Right.
Robin Williams played this off, because you could see in the way that he did it, the look in his face, the way he reacted, that was more than just a love for a mother figure. You could see almost like that love that he had for her when she was a young woman, right there. And I really like that. And you could see that multiple times in their interactions. Like there's something that's just under the surface. And it is a shame that we didn't get to see more of Robin Williams' potential as an actor. I feel like a lot of it was wasted in typecasting him. He got some work later on that he was able to do, but I feel like so much of his time was wasted just being typecast. So,
Right.
So interestingly enough, Spielberg in his later recounting of his experiences on the film, he said that he felt the most confident and the best about all the stuff prior to Neverland and the epilogue when they're back in the real world and all that stuff. He said that he felt like when he actually was in Neverland that he was less confident and that didn't really know what he was doing, and so he tried to cover it up with a lot of spectacle, a lot of sets, a lot of stuff happening, and that's where a lot of what I mentioned with pacing problems, a lot of that comes down to the fact that he's clearly kind of losing the plot ostensibly. But you know,
actually, as somebody that does this a lot day and night, or has a lot of knowledge, it's interesting how they presented England as so Dickensian.
yes.
I mean, you got that as well, right? Just like, and I think you even made a comment of the Dickens.
Well, so funny.
It felt
funny
so
funny you say
101
that.
Dalmatians.
Well, funny you say that. Funny you say that because when I was a kid, thanks Disney. But when I was a kid, I kind of always thought of England as like this really old-fashioned, like kind of backwards place, unbeknownst to me that England is not only up to date with us, but in some ways they're quite a bit ahead of us, or things that things that were
Not in
that took a
everything.
while to catch on here. Things that kind of took a while to catch on here, they were ahead of us in terms of not just laws and stuff, but I'm thinking culturally as well. Like I'm thinking like, they kind
Infrastructure.
of always loved dance music, infrastructure, but also like dance music, they were kind of ahead of us on, and it took us a while to really get into that. And even then it was a little bit limited, but
Can you guys still hear me?
it's just like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can hear you. But but it took me quite a few years to kind of unlearn that, and I think movies like Peter Pan, like 101 Dalmatians, like even The Parent Trap, which was set in contemporary times, even that their version of England is very
Stuffy.
stuffy, very like early 1900s when that movie, the one I saw, the 1998 one, was in then contemporary times. But it's like, yeah, thanks a lot. But
England just always
now
seems like
the
that kind of
original
place
Peter
in
Pan.
movies.
Well,
What was that, Dustin?
the original.
Oh, I said England just
original
always seems like
P-
that kind of place in movies. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Always
but
Dickensian when
but
it's not anywhere near.
Exactly.
I know.
Right.
Well, and that's that. Yeah, the original Peter Pan story was written in the early 1900s. Like, I think it was
Well,
Peter
yeah.
and Wendy was like 1903, something like that. But
Well, it was
you
the
know,
best
yeah,
of times and the worst of times, after all.
yeah, so it's a little couple decades after Charles Dickens, but not too many. Enough to where
Right.
there's adequate
War
comparison
never
there.
changes.
Yes.
Yeah,
indeed.
well, and that's another thing that is kind of important for us Americans to understand is obviously England is a much, much, much older country than us, and so they have a lot more lasting
I've seen
history,
Braveheart.
and
I know that.
oh, I know, but it's I'm saying like even London itself is quite a bit older than any of our cities, so their history is much better preserved.
Well, continuing with the well, go ahead, Jake.
Well, I was just going to say, speaking of like much, much older than us, and kind of hearkening back to an old fashioned England and what have you, and the question of typecasting a little bit. It's really interesting that this film kind of presaged what has become the like Maggie Smith was in her 50s, I think, but she was
Yes.
playing a
50s.
woman who was in her 90s, and they had aged her forward quite a bit. And in a sense, she basically was giving us a preview of what has become the Maggie Smith character nowadays. You got your Lady
Yeah.
Grantham, you got the role she played in Gosford Park, the one in Lady in the Van. She has kind of drifted into her own sort of typecasting lately, where she basically is the acerbic woman you do not want to cross, but that
Yeah.
could be your best friend and greatest ally if you wanted. And they kind of gave us a little taste of that here, even though she's very charming and friendly in the film for the most part. She does get that one great burn where Jack is like, it blows him out of the water, and she just looks at him, Peter, you've become a pirate. I love that line.
I absolutely love Maggie Smith. I think
Right.
she's incredible, and I particularly love it when
Mhm.
she's really witty and nasty to people. And
Right.
here she got to show a different side of her. Here she got to show a
Mhm.
different side of herself, and she made it work.
Right. But I did find it interesting. They chose to have her play someone so much older, even back then. It was like, I guess even then they were able to go, okay, well, who's the best old lady we could possibly find?
Well,
They could have
they
gone with
did the
Judy
same
Dench and
with
done the same thing, but
Max von Sydow, same thing with The Exorcist. They aged him up quite a
True.
lot. And funny part was when he actually got to be that age, it's like, oh, gee, look at that. He looks just like he did.
So getting back to the plot,
Okay.
we have that whole line that you just said,
Mhm.
and ultimately, what is it? Jack,
Mhm.
he gets into it with his wife. He gets into it with his kids. When it comes Peter
Jack's a
and
total asshole in the future.
what I'm saying is that Peter
Yes.
gets into it with his family.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are interfering with his work business, even though he's technically not supposed to be doing work on this a particular venture, and he basically screams his children out of the room. And that's when we get Moira telling him, hey, these are the years that our kids have before they're too old for us, for them to even care about it. And
when they want to be with us.
When
Correct.
The cat's in the cradle in the silver.
And so
That's funny you said that, because right when I saw that line, when they were talking about that, I kept thinking of that song and it was singing in my head as they were doing that discussion. So I thought that was hilarious.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dave.
So they end up kissing their kids goodnight. Jack, he gives his his pocket watch, which comes into play later on in the film.
I felt that one was rushed. I felt that scene was rushed as heck. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me, but I just felt like it was rushed. Like, here's my watch. It was very special. Bye.
Well, they were in a hurry. I don't get me wrong. I mean, they were late to their events that they were going to, anyways. So, I can see that. But
yeah, and I could see him doing it kind of rushed. It's sort of like awkward, like he wants to do it, but he feels like he's on eggshells because Jack did just draw that picture of him without a parachute. I mean,
which I'm sure didn't make him feel any better about the plane trip.
Yeah.
But I felt that the watch was an awkward way of, hey, I do care about you. I do love you. Here, this is something special, or trying to reconnect with him.
Right.
Like an awkward way of reconnecting.
Well, I get
like, here's the thing.
Yeah, I get that. That's the intention, is for it to be awkward and for it to, not really work. That's part of the point. I think the bigger story point that it serves is to introduce the whole theme of clocks and time, mortality, all that kind of stuff. Plus the fact that, that's Hook is running away from his own mortality as well. Even though he's a grown-up, he's still in a world where people can largely not age unless they get killed, obviously.
He's in a limbo hellscape, I mean.
You were talking about pacing earlier, and this is one scene where I feel like the pacing was too fast. Where I feel like Rob Williams just read off the lines as quickly as possible and bye. And I understand technically it's like with the kid, but I feel like more emphasis could be on it, because to me later on in the film, it really doesn't hit home as strongly as it could.
Mm-hmm.
Because really and truly, the watch has passed off like it didn't really mean that much in the first place. So him destroying the watch really didn't mean as much as it should have.
I can see that.
So I feel like a scene where they talked a little bit more about it, him trying his best to do something to make up for it, that was more my thought process as to why I feel like it could have been paced a little bit slower at this point.
The scene where they give him the watch is so fast, I honestly don't even remember it happening.
Well, that's the thing is,
right.
And then you're sitting there going, when he destroys the watch, it's like, oh, okay.
Well, that happened.
But we had to devote so much time to waking each and every one of the Lost Boys up and going through all the obvious sets of the Lost Boys lair and the pirate village and the skateboards.
We'll deal with that when we get to it.
Yeah, when we get to that.
Yep. We'll get to that. So ultimately, there are several things happening at this moment. I'm going to try to move it forwards a little bit. We've got this event. It's a charity event, and we get this whole honorary stand-up thing, which is actually kind of cool. A cool moment, because you get all of these orphans that have grown up from Wendy's care, and she's in tears. But when they get back to the house,
Well,
they
I do need to pause you because even when I was a kid, one of my favorite lines in the movie was, "I love that lawyer joke. I've always loved that lawyer joke that he tells." I just thought that was great. Yeah, so there's some things even rats don't do.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in any case, they arrive back at the home in a chauffeured limo, and they realize that the glass has been broken. They open the door. There seems to be like a tear, a rip in the door, like a scratch that's like huge.
That whole scene is terrifying. And
Yes.
the scene beforehand that we kind of skipped over
Yes.
is much more, even more terrifying than that, because while they're out and he's sitting there, he's barking with the dog, you think it's more comedic, but then it turns into something almost horrifying.
Well,
and
yeah.
Looking at it from the kid's point of view, my gosh, that was actually quite a scary scene. And you see the aftermath after that. That really does, in my opinion, make the scene work.
Yeah, and Toodles knew too. He goes, Hook, he's back. You know, like he knew right away that it was Hook. You know.
Yeah.
Because when you see them returning, they got all the the hook
there are
marks on the wall and all that.
certain
Yeah.
scenes and certain shots that you're like, okay.
I like how it implies that Hook went there in person, even though it seems like he's very not the type to do that.
And
it's a very personal thing for him. So
I do like how the hook that latches the window is a hook.
Yeah, I know that well. As soon as I saw our opening, I'm like, oh, that's a hook.
Well, there are certain shots in this, and even if they're little things like that one scene of the one close up of the hook in the darkness with the sparks, there are certain shots and moments that you're like, okay, that's for the trailer clearly, and the whole scene with the kids getting kidnapped and like the hook and all that stuff, you know, because it makes Hook out right away. A little bit of a shit me all that scary time. Captain was kind of a fop of a character anyway. A bit, I don't know. He never did. He just thought he was a silly character, but in that moment when you don't see him, you just feel his presence, and you see the aftermath. That perspective, it does really nicely, and it makes the stakes very real. So that's the more effective scenes.
I think as a child seeing that, again, I feel like there's a huge difference seeing as an adult or seeing as a child. But as a child, I do think that these scenes with Hook are quite scary. I mean, when you're a little child, even when you were like 11 or 12, like I was at the time, seeing that stuff going on, seeing somebody abduct you like that, that can be quite terrifying, especially with the knowing something's coming and all you have is your covers to protect you. That's, that's a real thing for a child.
Well, and then we get this
it's like a
scene
softer version of Poltergeist.
And then we get this scene with the detective afterwards.
Bill Collins.
Which at first I thought he looked like Harvey Keitel for a moment, but
on that note, I just want to say there's a lot of good cameos. There's a lot of good cameos in this movie.
Oh yeah,
in this first of them.
Yeah, I remember Kim actually going in. It's like, is that Phil Collins?
A lot of random cameos. Yeah, a lot of random cameos that you would never know unless you read about it, like the Carrie Fisher and George Lucas.
Right.
Like, there's no way you could tell that was them, because
or Jimmy Buffett and David Crosby.
But like that, and like Glenn Close as a male,
right?
Yeah, and Glenn close as a male pirate. It's like it's cool that they're there, but at the same time, it's like, why? Because but at the same time, it's like don't necessarily like why. I mean, other than
Like I say, I think it works in a way because it's kind of cool having those little Easter eggs in it.
Yeah.
And Spielberg
Mhm.
had just only Spielberg, maybe a few others, but Spielberg was one of the few people who had that type of pull to throw that many little Easter eggs into a film, just for the fact of being Easter eggs.
Well, and ultimately, we get that whole scene where Moira, she's sitting there flabbergasted, and but we get this scene between Wendy and Peter, where she basically like tells him point blank, "Do you not realize who you are?" And she shows him the book, and she's like, "Yeah, boy, that's who you are."
Admittedly, it's not a very flattering picture.
and yet,
Right.
and yet, he has his hands up there, there exactly like the picture, which he then puts down. But ultimately, he gets drunk in the children's room, and
As you do.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's where I would be, like getting drunk all the time, obviously.
he goes out on the balcony and sees a ball of light fly into the room. What do we think about this scene where we meet Tinkerbell for the first time in this film?
It's
Not
pretty good.
Tinkerbell, Firefly from Hell.
I absolutely love it.
out of
Like I
out
was
of
saying
all
earlier.
the out of all the main casting choices in this film, I think Julia Roberts is one of the weakest ones. I don't know who
Yeah.
else they really
She
could
get
have
nominated for
gotten at
Razzie for
this
this.
point in time. I wouldn't necessarily call it Razzie worthy, but I think it's more just a miscasting because she's playing
I think she
someone
did an
who's
awesome
like,
job.
on the one hand, well, she's playing it really like sweet, but at the same time, it's like the Tinkerbell character is a bit spicier than that. And I mean, I know
Right.
she's at a different place in her life, but
she was mischievous too. I mean, I think she played it just right. I mean,
I think
that's
I
how
don't-
I think of it. But
I don't know who else they could have gotten for this at this point in time, though.
I mean, when she was
I'm
beating
not
the heck
really
out of him, she was beating him up and she was
I'm
still
not-
like smiling, being happy and stuff. But she's beating the heck out of him and trying to wake him up to be that he's Peter Pan before she
I'm not
kidnaps
really.
him.
I'll be honest. I'm not really a Julia Roberts fan. I don't hate her or anything. I don't get it really. But I will say that I think that the decision to make Tinkerbell as strong as she is, on the one hand, it's like, well, with fairies, it's like, I don't know, you can do whatever you want with them. I guess it is just a little surprising that they make her as physically strong as she is. But if
Well,
Ant-Man
he
can do it,
does
she can
say,
do
"What
it.
do you related to Muddy Mouse?" A little
Yeah.
It'd be hilarious.
Now, in all fairness, I think as a child looking at it, I thought it was a good film appearance for her. I didn't mind her then. Again,
Yeah.
I guess like I say, it's about different perceptions.
Yeah,
I think
I like
she
Julia
could
Roberts,
have
so.
she could have done better. My understanding was that she did most of her roles basically with green screen and wasn't really interacting as much. And apparently she was kind of frustrated about that. But
She got called Tinkerhell. She got called Tinkerhell
Right.
for being difficult to
Well,
work
and,
with.
Right.
yeah,
She did a pretty
apparently
good
she and
job. That
Spiel-
surprises me.
Yeah, and
Well,
she was all
apparently
right for the
she
role.
and apparently she and Spielberg didn't get along very well, and it wasn't a great time for either of them, with each other. Like when their paths crossed, it just didn't work for them. And I know that there's been a lot of not so great stories about Julia Roberts as far as like being difficult to work with and being a diva and that kind of stuff.
Didn't you work with her again on Jurassic Park 2?
Was she in that?
With Julia Roberts? I don't know. You're thinking of Julianne
No.
Moore.
Yeah.
Oh, they look alike. Give me a break.
Tammy, what did you think of Tinkerbell?
No, they don't look alike at all.
No, not even.
No.
Tammy, what did you think of Tinkerbell?
I thought she was pretty good. It seemed like in a way it seemed like she was not relaxed, not really getting into the part in a way. I think she was like trying too hard to be Tinkerbell in a way instead of just relaxing and going with it. Just go with the idea. You're supposed to be a fairy,
I think she did well in her. I love her theme actually, as well.
What do you mean her theme? Musical theme. Okay.
Yeah, musical theme.
I thought. I thought you meant like her outfit or something.
See, I remember. I don't remember any of the animated Tinkerbell movies that came out. In fact, I don't even think I watched any of those. But I do remember Tinkerbell from the original Peter Pan animation, and from what I remember, she was quite insanely jealous.
She was
of Wendy and her time with him, and she was a little spunkster.
Yeah.
So
yeah, she was.
No, I just remember the Disney, the iffy Disney Peter Pan, and how Tinkerbell was just like didn't talk and had a bad attitude. So I liked this Tinkerbell better.
Are you talking about the 03 one?
I find it the 1953 animated version, which now the fun part about Disney's animated Tinkerbell is like I do find it funny how she did become such a prominent character and someone that Disney merchandised the hell out of, with T-shirts and stuff, and just I don't know. It's so funny that and she became like a weird sort of sex symbol in a weird way. But I'm like, she's also so teeny tiny, and she's interested in this much bigger boy, and it's like I don't know. The whole thing is like this doesn't work. This could never work.
Yeah, everyone's got their own kit.
Like I say, it's all dependent on when you see it. Also, like I said, it's hard for me to say. Like the other live action Peter Pan I saw. I want to say it's a French version. God, what version was that?
Well, the 2003 one had a French actress as Tink.
Yes.
Ludwig
And I really did not like that version of Tinkerbell, but I understand maybe as a child that it would be more. I hated her. I thought she was a terrible Tinkerbell. And that's the thing. But that's a different take from a different idea.
I loved. I saw the 03 one. I saw that in the theater, and I need to watch it again because I didn't really care for it when I saw it, but I was at a weird place in my life because I was neither really child nor adult anymore, and it, so it was kind of like wrong place, wrong time for me. But also, I did love Jason Isaacs as Captain Hook. I thought he was great.
He is more what I think you might consider a traditional Hook. And I was going to mention that I've only seen the movie a couple of times, so maybe I'm remembering this wrong. But I felt like that was, Dane, you were talking earlier about how weird it was that Hook was a Peter Pan-centered movie. I felt that Peter Pan was almost a Hook-centered movie, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was certainly he had a prominent role.
The character's larger than life. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would
I liked Hook's characterization in this a lot because he was just kind of a somewhat
he's great in this.
like depressed older guy.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I think Hook
I can really relate to that a lot now.
I agree there. I think that really this was more of a Hook movie. It came across that way more because Hook stole the show. The guy who played it,
Exactly.
I mean, he
You
amazingly
spend a lot of time
stole
with
the
him,
show.
yeah.
Yeah,
And you get to see
I
like a
would
lot
not.
of really fun moments with him too.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
Shmi,
he
stop
steals
me,
the show.
Shmi.
He steals the show, all right. But I still think that if you were to call it Hook, it would need to be something kind of like Wicked, that casts him as the good guy and cast Peter Pan as like this little devil, this horrible person that
It
terrorizes
was
this
kind of
poor.
already done in a mini-series on Sci-Fi Channel called Neverland. With
Yeah.
Not when this came
Ifans.
out.
No,
Don't
not when
forget
this.
about Once Upon a Time.
Oh,
That's
I
right.
did see. Yeah, I
Much
saw
more
bits
recent
of that,
thing.
and it was quite
Yeah.
good. I enjoyed what I saw.
Once Upon a
Yeah.
Time, basically, Hook becomes like the good guy, and Peter Pan was his father, who was an evil bastard.
Oh gosh, yeah, that was
in the show. So,
actually Hook.
There you go.
Once Upon a Time is definitely an underrated show,
I
though it
love
got
that show.
it went
Absolutely
over
loved
the
it.
top and kind of
Yeah, when he
fizzled out over time. But
when he became an adult, I kind of lost. I watched it, but it wasn't the same show. I didn't enjoy it as much.
but those
than-
early seasons were amazing, especially the first few. They really did.
Yeah,
an excellent job.
I love them all. I mean, Wizard of Oz and everything in it. I mean, just I love them all. Except, like I said, once he became an adult, then it kind of fizzled out. I really liked Once Upon a Time in Wonderland as well. And that unfortunately only got one season.
Yeah.
Well, at least it completed itself instead of leaving.
Yeah,
it
I
hanging.
mean, yeah, they didn't leave it. I guess they
Tied it off.
They were only going to do one,
Right.
so they tied it off. But yeah.
Right.
But in any case, so the kids are kidnapped, and Tink comes by, and she does the I don't believe in fairies. A fairy will die act, and then she basically wraps him on the head, or actually pulls the rug out. He falls. And she basically carries him off to Neverland.
Right.
He wakes up in Pirateville or Pirate Town or whatever, whatever you want to call it, and
Whatever Hook Village is called.
I call it a painfully obvious film set. A well-designed one, but a painfully obvious film set. It does not look like real people live there in the slightest.
Was anybody reminded of Sweet Haven from the Popeye live-action film?
Yes,
yes.
Really.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I felt like there's
it
a
looks
seen that. Like it's kind of a rare movie.
It looks like, honestly, something, not Universal, because this is not a Universal movie, but something that you would see at a theme park like Universal Studios, and then they just filmed on that. It really has that kind of, let's go on the Hook ride.
Yeah.
The swinging pirates.
Yeah.
Although I really do like this small scene that we get with Tinkerbell, where she basically fights these pirates off for him, and she gives him his get up with the black eye patch. And she's like, first off, act like you have a limp. Now drool. Now growl. Arr! How are you doing today? Fine. Just how are you? I love that because
and apparently that's a normal interaction for this little subside.
Probably, yeah.
Actually, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Robin Williams style humor, if you look at it, and who knows how much input he actually had into the comedic portions of that, but it feels like a Robin Williams style joke.
This is where we get into our first musical number in here, because we have a couple of musical numbers in the film that are done by people, and this is the Hook. Where's the hook?
Hook. I like that. I did like that piece.
It's only like 5 sentences. I don't know how much of a musical number it really is.
Yeah,
it's more. It's almost like a sea chanter, you might say.
A beat.
Yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
like this because they're shining the hook, and it's
Right.
given to Smee, and everyone's following Smee
Mhm.
to the head of the ship.
The Jolly Roger.
Who's gonna love
Does anybody
that
else
hook?
really like Shmi in this? Like,
Oh,
Smee
fuck
is
yes.
Hoskins is
awesome.
amazing.
Well,
in that.
Smee's
Yeah, what about
great,
Smee?
and like
he's
I don't
almost,
think I've
he's
seen
almost more
a.
relatable.
He's
in this
always
one.
Yeah.
eating or trying
What's
to
that?
steal the gold.
Wow, no,
I don't
I
think
wouldn't,
I've seen
I
a.
wouldn't, I wouldn't put it like that. He's like, you can, for some reason, like Shmi kind of resonated with me this time because it's like,
Yeah.
you know, you're like the second in command. Like this guy is nuts, but you kind of keep him together, and
He
Well,
was-
Smee.
you're almost running the
Smee's-
show yourself.
I
He
don't
was
think I've
always
seen a
one- he
version
was
of
always-
Smee I haven't liked.
Yeah, I always liked most versions, but this was always, I think, my favorite character in the movie when I was a kid. And honestly, to me, someone said something about they barely recognized Bob Hoskins. I think this was probably my introduction to Bob Hoskins. And so for me, it was the opposite. I always thought of him as Smee, probably for several years after this
Well, you
movie.
see, I was
Yeah.
too young to recognize actors or actresses in most
Same.
films.
I didn't
never.
even realize that was him this time.
Yeah,
I
when
do
I was
believe-
older, I recognized people, but that was later.
I
So,
do
yeah.
believe this was the first film that I recognized Bob Haskins from, and then I saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that was
Right.
the second
Right.
movie that
He
I
looked very
remembered
different
him
with
from.
a shave.
But
I like
yeah,
that. I like that later moment with Shmi. We're getting slightly ahead of ourselves here. But Shmi, do something intelligent. Runs inside, steals all the valuables. escapes.
but this very beginning a moment where we actually meet Hook for the very first time is kind of a priceless moment in here, because that's when you're introduced to the man in charge, and obviously he shows us exactly what kind of person he is, because then he's like, somebody here is not who they say they are.
He's very aristocratic in this.
Right. Well, he said,
Well,
someone said I couldn't do it. You're talking about stealing the kids, you know. So someone
Yeah.
doubted me.
Well, and honestly, like again, the
You.
build up of Hook was very effective, and
Mhm.
again, you look at Dustin Hoffman and you think Captain Hook, come on, but he actually, again, he makes you buy it. You know, he really does. He gets into it, and
Yeah.
you know, he really disappears into the role, and Captain Hook has always been kind of a fop as a character. And he does it very well, but he also, you know, the attempt is to try to show that he's, you know, also kind of merciless at the same time, you know. So I get the intention of that scene. I do think they probably could have sped it up just a little bit, but I think for the most part that scene is effective, and it also does effectively recount his history with Japan. You know, that cocky boy who cut off my hand and fed it to the crocodile. But that he killed him, stuffed him, you know, turned him into the clock, and who didn't believe I could do it? You know,
Right.
you know, it's a good,
So-
it's a good reversal.
Well, it's a great character intro overall because, yes, he does that story where you can tell he's a good orator. He's good at getting people's attention and, you know, that sort of thing.
And, he's
And
much
then, of course,
smarter
when
than
he
you
goes
expect,
into accusatory mode where he's like, you. And you're like, oh, man, I would not want to make him angry. But then he steps forward and then he steps back, Smee. And then Smee does that thing where the red carpet comes down. And then I just love that where he refused to walk down without the carpet.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's the
But
thing, is he
then-
let the line of intimidating versus foppish, as you say.
in any case, he
very
gets
fancy lad.
he walks straight up to almost Robin Williams' character that he's playing at the moment, but he looks to a man to his right and he's
you
and
bet
he's
that I
like,
couldn't
you.
do it. Come on, I confess
And then-
to your captain. Yes. It's like it's all
the
right.
boo box.
Put him in the
Yeah.
box. No.
But ultimately, we get the moment where he is
Notably, that was the Glenn Close appearance. She's credited as gutless.
Okay, I can see that. But we get the moment where his kids appear in that net, and that's when he makes himself known as Peter Panning, actually, because that's who he thinks he is. And we get the whole Smee is got his whole medical records. So they pull up his shirt and shows him the scar that apparently he gutted him while around Tiger Lily or something like that.
That's my appendix.
Now the whole medical record thing. Okay, so they've had to have made, I assume, they probably would have to have made a couple different trips back to the quote unquote real world to get that. But I was just looking at that scene. I was like, how the fuck did they get that? And like, I mean, I get it. It's kind of meant to be a joke, but at the same time, it's like, of all the things, I have never would have thought that they'd have gone there, for like establishing that he's Peter Pan.
Well, it just shows you how resourceful
like,
Smee is.
I get, but it's at the same. I believe me. I don't doubt that they could have. It's not like it's a plot hole or anything, because they definitely could have made multiple trips to the real world to figure that out, and they probably had to do recon on figure out where he lives and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's like, geez, of all the things, I never would have thought for a fantasy movie to do that. But someone had to be the first, I guess.
Right.
Well, basically, the thing is, Peter basically tells Hook, "Give me my kids. That's all I want." He's like, "Okay, well, you can get your kids," and he tells his men to hoist them up. If you can go up there and get them yourself.
The interaction between them,
Fly up there.
vocally,
Fly up there.
is great. Just how they go back and forth. It's like, this must be remedied. Yes, I want my children, and I want my war. Just back and forth that they had vocally
Right.
shows the
All right,
skill
what-
that both actors have together.
And then he pulls out his checkbook.
Yes, he says, "Draw your weapon," and he pulls out his checkbook.
And in a moment of frustration, Captain Hook just like pulls a gun and shoots the checkbook.
Yes. I love that. But
Like,
then the
whole-
best part was
during the
like he
whole
makes that
scene-
challenge, and then Peter leans in, and no, Peter Pan has a real problem with heights.
And at first he's like, "You're joking." No.
Well, and then
It's like,
and then
Captain Hook is
that's
a
when you get
surprisingly good
the
sport who's like honoring this up until that moment, and he's like, "Oh, okay, what?"
And that's when you get the real brains of the outfit. Smee saying he's been so long in the real world that he's forgotten who he is and who has forgotten everything. So that's when he's like, "Oh, just kill them all." But that's when you get the Tinkerbell saying, "Hey."
I almost feel bad for Captain Hook in that scene because he's like so excited. It's like we're gonna have a final battle. This will be it.
Right.
And it's like, are you your?
Well,
no. What?
there's some interesting
About life signing
parallels
up for
between
Paul.
Captain. There's some interesting parallels, especially in the scene that we get later with Hook, kind of in existential suicidal despair. There's some interesting parallels between Captain Hook and the Joker there, because you remember the Batman the Animated Series episode, Who Killed Batman, where he's like, without Batman, crime has no punchline, and he almost like he loses his purpose, his reason for being. And in this case, it's like with Hook, it's like he's been spending his whole life wanting to beat his enemy, but it's like if his enemy has already
Effectively
ceased to
beaten
be,
himself.
exactly. So it's like, well, what's the purpose of my life? That whole thing. I think that's a
Right.
great angle. And then and again, there are some dumber moments yet to come, particularly with the Lost Boys. But then one of the best lines, some of them are with Peter versus Hook, as you would hope. But one of the best lines is at this stage, which is, "Give me a hand. I already have." Ooh, whatever.
The wordplay is actually
Yeah.
the wordplay in this script is very well done. A lot of the back and forth, and that's all throughout the movie. A lot of the back and forth is quite well done. I don't feel like there's enough credit given for that. A lot of times, it's just how well written the dialogue is. They're very
Another
smart.
thing I want to give a shout out to is something that hits you differently at different points in your life. I think when I was a kid, I was probably more frustrated with Peter at this point. But the more I've gotten older, the more I've felt for him. But the whole thing where he can't reach out and grab his kid's hands, he is scared to death of letting go of that thing. And yes, there is that joke that Hook makes that Peter's afraid of heights, but in a very real, visceral sense, he is afraid of heights, which is ironic for the character. But it really, though, you see, and again, this is Robin Williams being able to do a great job. You can see how desperately he wants to do it, and he can't do it.
Well,
And
and
so
moment
that
where he
was,
gives up.
yeah.
Well, yeah, his son believes that he just gave up. Like he couldn't even do it, which Hook plays on later on. But ultimately, Tinkerbell flies in and it's like, Hook, I promise you your bloody war if I can shape him up in 3 days' time. And they agree to it, I guess, after a few quid pro quos. But
says a week's time, and then Hook is like, you get 2 days, and then she's like 3 days, and he's like, fine. So they actually haggled with the time.
She goes
like I
4.
said, after a few quid pro quos,
and then Hook negotiates down to 3, and she takes it.
I mean, her interactions with Hook show that show her potential as a really good actress in this role. The problem is it didn't stick necessarily all the way, but she really did bounce off of him very well. You could tell that she could go with the best of them when it comes to that. It would just it didn't hold throughout the movie, but in that scene it held very well. I mean, how much energy she put into it.
And of course, Hook gets another great little thread in there. It's like something like, "You better come through, Miss Bell," or something like that. And he's like, "Or no amount of clapping will bring you back from where I will send you."
The pirates also go, ooh, at that too.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Peter gets back-ended off the ship. He has a moment with the mermaids. He surfaces.
Does he?
Yeah, he has more than a couple of moments with the mermaids.
He eventually gets into like this shell thing, and they hoist him up to meet the Lost Boys.
Yep, and he tumbles down into their so-called lair, and that's when he gets his leg caught on the clock that is connected to Tink's home, and she wakes up the Lost Boys, and that's when she yells, "Pan's back!" and all the Lost Boys come.
This is one of the scenes. This is one of the scenes where I very much agree with Dane's assessment. I feel like they really could have trimmed this scene down, and there were a couple of others with the Lost Boys that they. When you're a kid, you're kind of enjoying them, you're grooving them. You're like, the Lost Boys are fun, but they really do kind of drag the plot of the film down, I think, and in some ways. And
I think those
Well,
scenes. I
yeah,
think those
it's
scenes
well,
are
it's like
fine. Like
it's like
we
I
kind of
think they're
needed
fine
them.
too.
We
Spielberg.
kind of needed them for like the kid
Well,
adventure thing that we were doing. I
maybe
mean,
maybe if they didn't scream early '90s kids film as loudly as
Yeah.
they do, they wouldn't jar as
That's a good point.
much.
I mean, it
Yeah, it's like
reminded me a
Rufio.
lot of
Rufio's
Beyond
pretty cool.
Thunderdome. I don't know
Yeah, a little bit.
because just I don't know why,
So
but I kept thinking Beyond Thunderdome with this thing where the kids like that little town or whatever, that colony, totally made up of
Bartertown?
children. No, that was
Yeah.
the adult colony, the one that Max hits later, where it's just kids, and that to me is that's what that reminds me of, the Lost Boys.
Well, you
The
know what it
Lost
reminds
Boys
me.
is
it
more
reminds
like
me.
the Lord of the Flies.
Oh yeah, Lord
You
of the
know what
Flies
It's
preschool.
not terrible.
I love Lord of the Flies. It's such a great book.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying the situation in Lord of the Flies is very
Oh.
dark and terrible.
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be.
I mean, the Lost Boys are having a good time. There's no Lord of the Flies there.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
true.
even Robin Williams makes the joke there. It's like, what is this, some Lord of
Yeah.
the Flies preschool?
That's pretty funny. But no, the whole thing with introducing the Lost Boys, and like that whole thing goes on way the hell too long. And also, it's like, and I get why. It's because, again, early '90s movie. It's a bunch of
Merchandising.
rowdy kids doing rowdy kid things. That and that too, because the whole Lost Boys lair, it's like, you can buy this toy, you can buy the play set, that whole thing. It definitely gives off that vibe.
The pirates on later.
Yeah. Yeah, and all the pointless shit that Rufio swings around on is like, oh shit. And
Well,
and even
to me,
stuff,
I take that.
I can't remember if it was Burger King or McDonald's, but somebody had Happy Meal toys for Hook, and one of them was Rufio on like a sailboard.
I'm sure.
I had that Rufio toy.
Oh
yeah, I did too. Where was that from?
See,
Does
I
anybody
feel.
remember?
I feel like
people love Rufio. People
I feel
love
like
Rufio,
this-
but like to me, and not saying I dislike him. I'm just saying, like, he as a character like reeks of the period that he came out in.
Dave, you were talking about something.
I feel like this whole see, we haven't seen a live. This is like the first live action film that has to do with Peter Pan. This
Unless
was
you're really
the first one.
and French and stuff
so
like that.
to me, I loved seeing the setup to the Lost Boys. I had not seen it other than the animated film. So please show me some of where their habitats are. I want to know what
I
the Lost
agree,
Boys
and
were.
I loved how Robin Williams is like, "Oh, this is a nightmare. Who's your lawyer? Like what's he's acting like a lawyer, but
That's not pointless. That's showing you and getting you to know these characters.
I agree,
because it is about the Lost Boys and how Peter Pan basically mothered them, and originally the story was he fought Captain Hook to keep these lost boys alive, because Captain Hook hunted them like scoundrels, So,
okay, I checked, and apparently those were Happy Meal toys for McDonald's, and it looks like I actually had them all and just didn't realize I had them all. There were only 4, I guess, though, so not a difficult task.
But
and again, I have to ask, how in the hell does Neverland have skateboards and basketball? I'm like, come on.
Well, if you look at the Lost Boys clothes, it's pretty clear that a lot of them they're from different time periods.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and obviously, if Hook can come back and steal Pan's kids, don't you think Tinkerbell could have like gone on fairy errands with them back to the real world?
They can go and steal basketballs.
Well, that and again, I'm not calling bullshit on it because of that exact reason. I got so the Lost Boys and Neverland in general, again, kind of a death metaphor as well. The idea that children's spirits can live on past their physical lives and all that stuff. Because J.M. Barrie, there's a reason why the Children's Hospital, why they got the rights to the original play and that kind of stuff, because he was around that kind of a world all the time. And so he made a story about kids who didn't grow up and who didn't have to suffer and die and that kind of stuff. So I get the metaphor, and I also get the in-universe logic of, there's obviously a lot of interdimensional travel, so of course stuff can come back. So it's not a logic hole, it's more of like this just reeks of an early 90s movie, which again,
supernatural fantasy world. You're thinking about this too hard.
Again, I think sometimes you just gotta let it be what it is.
Well, you just gotta relax and watch the world that's being invented here. I mean, this was an invention of an only animated film at this point in time.
Well, actually, this was a year after.
True.
This was a year after Peter Pan and the Pirates started, which is. I had forgotten about that, but that was a big part of was it Saturday morning when that was on or whenever?
Peter Pan and the Pirates?
That was an animated
piece from the early 90s.
Yeah, I was quite a fan of that at the time.
I didn't see it.
So that was also
thinking about
there were a couple of live action interpretations before this, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Only stage adaptations.
Right. Well, my point is Peter Pan and the Pirates did have a lot to do with the Lost Boys. And that one was, being a series, it spent a lot of time showing different corners of Neverland. So I guess I wasn't coming to it as much as this is the first time. It was more of, well, that's not what I remember. You know what I mean? So I think maybe also I always did think of it as being a different take, which even as a kid, I probably thought of it as a different take, but it's still an interesting take. And I again, my thing is I think they easily could have cut 4 or 5 minutes just by tightening those scenes. That I wouldn't say necessarily do away with most of them, but
and that would be a movie I would never watch. So moving on.
I mean, as George Carlin once said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, but sometimes it's a big brown. Well,
sometimes it's a big brown dick.
But in any case, so we get this whole scene where obviously Rufio is the leader of the Lost Boys now. He's obviously a character who's rose to the ascension of the Pan sword holder.
He's clearly much older than most of the other Lost Boys too.
Correct.
He looks like 14, and everybody else looks like 10 and under.
And there is something that I did want to have Tammy mention here, what she noticed about Rufio as his character progressed. Tammy, you said that something about when the food scene happens, how his acting was. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, he seemed, when he walked away at the food scene and he walked away all frustrated, he seemed like he wasn't just frustrated, like acting. He seemed like he was really frustrated. And it seemed like there was a few other times that he actually really seemed frustrated in his acting ability or what he was doing at the time. And it seemed like it came out in some of his scenes.
Well, I think with that, in those scenes, like him being frustrated is he's been the leader for so long, and now Peter Pan's back, and he's got to compete with Peter Pan again.
Well,
and you can tell that that's getting to him. So I mean, I didn't think that was like it all read as acting to me. Like I didn't think he's a good actor. Like I think he's been in a bunch of other stuff too, and like he's an established actor now.
And I'll give him this.
I think he's just good. I don't think he's
Rufio,
actually frustrated.
I think Rufio is a much better character than many people give him credit for. He's not just a 90s meme. He's actually a fairly complex character. I mean, you've got a character who is already sitting there, and you can tell the character felt betrayed by Peter Pan by leaving them. And you can tell the pain that he has there and the joy that he has when he sees his friend finally reunited, because they were very close at the time, obviously, because Peter gave him second in command when he did that. So again, just as a thought on top.
Yeah.
Well, and also he probably was feeling at least as much disappointment as Hook at seeing what had become of Peter. You know.
Well, he didn't want to believe it.
Right.
I mean, much like Hook, there was that disbelief, like, this can't be him. This is not the person I remember. This is not my friend.
There was a cute moment with one of the lost children when he put his hands on his face to have the others recognize him. I thought that was a very cute moment.
That was cute.
Oh,
that was a good defining scene. Definitely not one I would have cut if you're talking about pacing. That one definitely should have definitely stayed in regardless.
But ultimately what happens is they basically put him through his paces and have him exercise. They try to get him to a happy spot, and Rufio tries to teach him how to swing the sword. Except he makes him drop his pants instead. But ultimately, at the end of everything, I do like that imaginary food moment where they just end up name calling each other, and then it becomes reality.
That's a fun scene where Peter Pan's just like, "What the hell is going on?" And then, like, as he gets more into like the name calling contest, you can tell it's starting to come back to him, and it's like, "Good, you're using your imagination." And suddenly he can see all the food.
Well, yeah, and I think this is the first moment where he uses his imagination for the very first time, and it's like the first.
It's like being tapped into the magic again.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an excellent thing when you're talking about a child versus an adult, because I remember watching this with my mother, and my mother's like, "Gosh, what kid would be appetized by that stuff? It looks like Play-Doh." And then as a kid, I thought this was like, it all looks sugary and bright colors, and I'm just like, "Ooh, this is the kind of thing I would imagine."
That doesn't melt.
That's all cake frosting. What are you talking about?
As an adult, I look at it and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that looks like Play-Doh." Yeah, I agree with her, but. Yeah,
I always thought it looked like Play-Doh myself. If it looked more like frosting, I would have found it. Yeah, I never thought it was super appetizing. But yeah, with the
Play-Doh
whole
at some point in their lifetime.
But yeah, in the whole the name calling bit, I do want to mention, like, you got the Rufio just lays in them. You are fart factory, slug slime, sack of rat guts and cat vomit, etc., etc., etc. Flies on the side. Peter comes back, substitute chemistry teacher.
Bag of food,
math tutor. I got to admit, math tutor might be the worst insult on the list.
They are freaks, yes.
But yeah, But as they do eventually get back, and it was interesting.
And not only does the imagination start to return. Not only does the imagination return, so does his swordsmanship at the end there, where Rufio ends up throwing a coconut at him at the when he stands up on the table, and he just swivels around and cuts the thing clean in half. that is such a great moment
Right.
because even he like puts the sword down like, holy shit.
Like, how did I do that?
Yeah. Like, what the hell?
and then we get
and then
I think this is when we have that whole suicidal moment.
yes,
Hook.
that wonderful scene with Smee and
Probably my
Hook.
favorite
Yeah, that
scene.
was just a great. Yeah,
Try and stop
time
I
me.
just had an
Shmi.
apostrophe.
This time
Well,
I'm going to do
try to
it,
stop me.
Shmi. Don't you try and stop me, Shmi. And Shmi's like, oh, we're doing
Me
this
just
again.
can't stop eating through that whole moment.
Well, Shmi's been through this over and over again, and you can tell because he's like sitting there, like, yeah, whatever.
Oh,
And,
not this again.
He's like, try and
But,
stop me.
but
Shmi.
yeah.
Get off your ass, come over here and stop me.
Right. Don't make a move, Smee. Not a step. My fingers on the trigger. Don't try to stop me.
And then it's at this moment he
Never
basically
scare me again like that, Smee.
it's at this
Right.
moment he basically convinces Captain Hook that
Yes.
he can make the little buggers love him.
Well, he's got that great line where he gets you see the light bulb over his head. I've just had an apostrophe.
You mean
I
an
think you mean an
epiphany.
epiphany. Lightning has just struck me brain. Well, that
Never
must have hurt.
What was that scene? There was a scene in the Time Bandits. It was very simple. I've got an idea forming in my head.
Yeah.
That reminded me a lot of that because I love Time
So,
Bandits,
yeah.
and that was there right beforehand.
Right.
You know how memory is such a deceptive thing because I remembered seeing the scene where Hook is on his little throne there on his captain's chair and he's kind of talking to himself. I can't remember if he was despondent or if he was ponderous in thought. It was one of those two. In my memory as a kid just flipping channels, in my memory it was a much darker, more sinister scene. And I thought to myself, "Oh, this is the grittier, Hook, origin movie, or it's the Hook-centric movie." And then, of course, it wasn't that later. But that's just memories of the thing because your brain connects it in a way that's not commensurate with reality.
Right.
Well, yeah, because in the original cartoon, the darkest moment in that was when he had Tinkerbell in his ship, and he was planning on blowing up the Lost Boys' home or whatnot, and using Tinkerbell. Other than that, he was kind of very cartoony, but in any case, after that, they have what looks like a small classroom.
Right.
And he basically point tells them, you know what? I think your mommy and daddy were just putting you to sleep in bed at night to just get rid of you. Because before you were born, things were better. And he's basically trying to convince them that their parents really didn't care about them.
I used a lot of truthful.
They
things.
tell you stories to shut you up.
There's a lot of that's truth, but there's more to it. Half truths, and half truths can be very powerful. I mean, that whole the idea that story is like, before you were born, your parents used to stay up just to see the stars, and just to look at that, to talk about that. Of course, they probably did. And that's the thing is, yes, there is truth to that, but again, it's leaving out.
And the little girl, the little girl was like, "You're a very bad man. You just need a mommy." And that's when Smee gives her an F, and she's like, "He gave me an F."
Tail hurts me. That's a flogging Lulu.
Right.
That reaction never fails to amuse me for some reason. But ultimately, it's the son, Jack, who starts to listen to Hook, and hook, line, and sinker. He starts to believe him, and that's in the next scene where we get with the clocks. And go ahead.
And I think that's actually an interesting thing psychologically, though. Usually, in many cases, the daughter is more a daddy's girl, and the son is more attached to the mother. In this case, in this family, the son is far more attached to the father, whereas the daughter couldn't give two craps about the father. So, in a way, that works to the daughter's advantage. Because when you're talking about this plot, it's like, yeah, you could tell me all about my father. I know he's a flake, but I don't care. I remember my mommy, and she does care about me. And darned if she doesn't. So it's just that's kind of I just found that interesting.
So basically, at the end of this psychological moment with clocks, he basically tells him, "Hey, let's have a baseball game or some shit like that," and that's when you get the moment where Peter is with the Lost Boys, and they attempt to tell him to steal the hook.
Hook does. You were talking about lies and half truths and whatever, and it's all in the phrasing. And Hook just tells Jack, "It's like, Jack, have I ever lied to you?" It's like he's known him for a day and a half. How many chances has he had to tell him? You know?
And we've talked about the acting of a lot of these people, but the little girl who plays his daughter is amazing in her ability to act.
That's
she
one
does
thing.
A great job with the part.
That's one thing that Tammy mentioned too. Tammy, would you like to say something on his daughter?
I thought that she played the part very well. She's got the innocence, and like you guys were saying when you gave me an F, the way she busted out with that and was just so hurt, but it was so believable too. How hurt she was about that and how much it upset her. And we haven't gotten to it yet, but when she does the little song, it's just, it tugs at you because she does it so well.
Yeah, the only legit song that made it into the movie from when it was going to be a musical. Yeah,
kind of reminds me of Somewhere Out There. Really, that song, very, very much reminiscent of that film, which was
actually
very much big when I was a kid.
I could be remembering this wrong, but that may have been what triggered us watching this a couple months ago, because I want to say that when it was suggested that someone was thinking that Somewhere Out There was the song from the movie, but no, that's American Tail, which we do need to cover eventually.
They wanted you to think it was the one from that film. It's a tricksy film.
Very tricksy. Yes.
But ultimately, we get Peter Pan trying to steal the hook, but he gets caught watching his son play this set up baseball game. And I do like how the baseball game is kind of set up. And there's this one guy who goes and steals the base. Yeah.
Pick him off by shooting him.
And that's when Hook says, "Hey, baseball is a really violent sport, isn't it?"
Yeah, it's a violent sport, this baseball. But no, but he calls him out for bad form, which I always thought that was.
It's a running gag.
Love that. Yeah, I love that term, or that use of that term by Hook, is good form and bad form. I always found that very interesting.
And before
Uh,
Maggie was dragged off and out the room, she said, "Run home, Jack, run home," which comes into play here because
Right.
the guys in the stands, instead of saying "home run," they said "run home," and
Right.
it took his mind off, and he almost like thought of Maggie and home for a moment, you know.
Well,
Right.
Maggie
Yeah.
does
Snap out of it for a
present
minute or two.
wisdom in this, and
Well,
a lot of times when they put little girls in films, I noticed that a lot of times they use them to present innocence and wisdom, and usually young boys to present stupidity, which
Well,
is
he
true.
does,
Most young boys are stupid, so I can't really hold that against them.
but he does get his home
well,
run. Yeah.
Well, and
so an
he hits it out of the park.
interesting thing
Go ahead.
interesting thing with the whole base game. Anything old baseball gets shut. As I was watching, I was like, "This is so dumb." But at this time, I was like, "Well, if we've got skateboarding and we've got basketball, then why the fuck can't we have baseball?" And I do like thematically what they are able to do with that, with the run home thing, because, like I said before, being Peter Pan is a state of mind at this, as much as it is being an actual boy who doesn't grow up and that kind of stuff. In that same way, remembering the happy thoughts that make you fly, remembering you know being in that state of positivity, ostensibly under Hook's spell, he doesn't think of somewhere outside of Neverland as his home, and so then run home that is like him. It's up waking up, and they communicate that pretty effectively. So, for as kind of weird as it is for pirate baseball, at the same time, that and as overt as that is, at the same time, it does reinforce some of the psychological aspects of what it means to be Peter Pan, and more importantly, the connection of flying with everyone. And then, of course, you get the one, like, again, I love Robin Williams in this. He does give that one weird. It's just kind of a weird line delivery. I don't know how to explain
Well,
it. It's just
yeah.
like, you went with that. I don't know.
And
It could just be a weird line. I mean, I don't know how else he could have said it.
And I think this moment right here is the first moment that I think will spark the whole Hook versus Pan idea, at least in this version of Peter Pan, because he didn't really have like anything against him really all that much, except for the kidnapping of his kids. But something to really push it forwards is to show that whole father reversal role that Hook was doing on his son.
Well,
that
was the point. that was his plan.
Yeah.
Well, so that's kind of the thing I noticed with this film is like, I love the idea of Hook. Instead of like, oh, I'm going to kill the kids or I'm going to do this and that, I like the idea of him turning them ostensibly to the dark side, basically. And that it's temptation, but the best temptation from a devil like
character through you.
Yeah. Well, but the best temptations from any kind of devil like character in any of these stories, the best temptations come from real life, real wounds that characters have that can be exploited, and usually it's a good argument that he has, which is his father really isn't there for him, so you totally buy why Jack would fall down that path, and
they set it up really well, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Now again, the stakes or the actual thing in question, it's a baseball game, really not all that consequential in the long run, but for a kid it certainly would be. And so again, I do think the actual staging of the temptation and of the brainwashing is a little bit cheesy, with pirate baseball and stuff, but at the same time, thematically, I love where they're going with it.
Well, in any case, he hits the ball out of the park, and eventually it hits Robin
Well,
Peter Banning on the head.
Well, but hang on, but we forgot about the fact that Smee, we talk about Smee a lot in here. He throws the ball and it has like smoke on the end of it for no reason.
One heck of a curveball.
And it's like, geez, he would put any Major League Baseball pitcher to shame with that kind of throw.
Well, this is why, I don't know why, but I feel like the art direction in this and the art direction in Popeye, and we've talked about Popeye in the past, are very similar. It's weird.
Right.
It's just, like I said, there's a lot of similarities in it. I could see this sort of art direction being in that movie as we watched it back in.
I like this set better, though. But in any case, so we get the whole hitting on the head. He gets the baseball out of the water, and then he follows his shadow, which I like. I like this moment where they actually do bring back an original element from the animation that his shadow is telling him to go to this place, and he uncovers the old Lost Boys hideout, and he ends up going through some memory displays, which I thought were kind of cool, doing some backstory actually on Peter Pan, because he finds a teddy bear inside that reminds him of his childhood. He remembers his mother, but ultimately he remembers being a daddy, and that was his
happy thought.
Yep.
Well, it's a little bit deeper than that though, because that's my favorite scene in the whole thing is when he's actually getting his memory back, because it really does hone in on the character's psychology. Even if the flashbacks are a little bit flawed, because he says, his narration doesn't always match up with what we're seeing, because he says that he didn't want to grow up because everybody who grows up has to die someday, which perfectly fine. That is at the core of who Peter Pan is. He's someone that doesn't want to grow old, doesn't want to die, so he wants to be a little boy forever, have fun. That's all great, but we see him and he's a baby, and it's like babies don't have any concept of death.
Yeah,
that's the thing that bothered me.
Actually, that's not entirely true.
What was it? No, sorry.
Babies are very conscious. Babies are very conscious of their world and their surroundings.
Okay, he said he ran away.
He's fundamentally overthinking everything.
Yeah, he said he ran away though, and he didn't run away. Just the carriage went down the damn hill. So.
I did find that funny.
Plus,
but
if you listen to his mom's voiceover, it sounds like his life has already been planned out for him.
Yeah. I did think he seemed a little on the young end.
Peter Pan's about embracing freedom too, right? I don't think he would really want to live that life that they had picked for him.
Yeah,
right. If he were a little bit, old, I could have thought that the narration would have matched what we were seeing.
I agree.
When you're a baby, it's like, come on, the babies don't they have awareness, and they have basic pain and pleasure awareness, that kind of stuff. They don't think about existential questions quite
what
that deeply, not until you get to be
not unless you're boss baby.
His original name was Damien, and he was using his psychic powers to move the carriage.
Either that, or there was that baby who smoked the cigar in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which we got Bob Haskins in here. So
yep. Also,
my point is that is my favorite scene, because again, it really does zero in on who Peter Pan is psychologically, but also why that character would choose to grow up, and not even like he was tricked into it or anything. Like, it was clearly a choice and it clearly was him realizing that there are greater things in the world than just being a little boy all the time.
Well, yeah, you
And that
would think that maybe he might have been at least a little older when he was talking about running away. You know,
Well,
Well,
at least
and
the age
well,
where he
here's
could run.
well, and
Right.
here's yeah, that is a little bit weird. Now here's the funny thing about that in the Nostalgia Critics review, again back when I used to watch that religiously in my early 20s. One of that whole scene, he was like, it's a great scene, but there's also 5 major plot holes. One of them was the yeah, it was minor, but it's like there were few that were minor, which was, why did you build the new hideout on top of the old hideout? And then why doesn't Hook just burn that hideout? Then it was, you didn't run away, you strolled away, and you're a baby. And you're not you don't have any concept of death yet. You can't even, see most colors yet. And then the other one was when he goes back to see Wendy every summer or whatever, spring or summer, whatever that was. He's like
why
he's a
wasn't
little
he older?
boy. Then he's a well, he was a little bit older, and it's like so all of a sudden he was
Well,
he
that
was
one's
like all of a
easy
sudden
enough.
he's a freaking
That one's
Well,
easy
Probably
enough
grow
to
up
look
past
at.
being a baby too, so that made it even
Well,
worse.
I was gonna
And,
say that could be easy enough to just say, well, time flowing differently, and Peter is not known to be the most responsible individual. He
Yeah.
might think that it's been a year, and it might have been 10 years, and
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, well, because his point was, I'd sue Neverland for fucking false advertising. As far as like the fact that he does grow up a little bit each time he comes
Yeah, I
back.
mean,
But I could. The thing is, though, I could actually buy that because if he spent such a long time in a place where not even the adults age, because like Captain Hook and the other pirates, they don't seem to age either. But then upon returning to the quote unquote real world, maybe time catches up with him a little bit more than it otherwise would. So I could buy that even if he didn't stay that long. Maybe it's like time trying to like a whiplash effect. You know what I mean?
I like to think that he met Tinkerbell at a very young age, and kind of like what was like her best friend while he was growing up, and then ultimately she probably ferreted him away to Neverland, and so that that would stay his age.
You see, it was Neverland was a really was a ripoff to him
but
because
then
he
why
wanted to stay
isn't
as
he
an
just
infant.
a perpetual baby?
Yeah, that's the thing. He wanted to stay an infant. He didn't want to grow past being an
That's what
infant.
I'm saying. Yeah, like why didn't he stay?
So Neverland was like a crock.
Why didn't he stay as an infant? Yeah,
and it could just be that time passes.
Maybe if he returned as an infant, and then by the
I always
been
just thought of it as
yeah.
I always just thought of it as time passes really slowly.
Yeah.
And there, and that still allows for aging, but I mean, Peter had been there for how long? We don't know. He might have been there for a good
his
long
trips to the real world with Tink were quite a deal of time was spent.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a space-time continuum thing because Neverland is second star to the right and straight on till morning, so it's
true.
Maybe they went straight on to lunchtime instead, and then they just
There you go. Well, but yeah, I mean, but that is my favorite scene because like it shows that he would make a choice to and realize that there are greater things in the world than just staying perpetually young but also perpetually immature, that with age comes increased responsibilities but also comes increased joys with like a real loving meaningful connection with someone and bringing people into the world, new people, children and a family and all that stuff. So it's like, yeah, the pains are greater, but the joys are greater too. And you also notice that young Wendy, is a not yet star Gwyneth Paltrow, which is pretty cool.
Now, when we're talking about times when this movie might not hold up to current times, there weren't a lot of Me Too or like culturally like problematic issues with this film, other than it being 90s, except for the whole scene where he kisses Wendy there. I know, like, for instance, one of the big things is that Snow White is now looked at as a very bad movie because the prince kissed her without
Non-consensual.
consent. So therefore, he raped Snow White and should be looked at as a bad guy.
Which is so stupid.
Although
I don't laugh at it because
I would say
it's true.
staying in
That's how they look at it. But yes,
staying in a perpetual coma, though, that's okay.
I would say, given all the Beatles decor in Moyer's bedroom, we could just say, hey, it was the '60s.
Yeah, but staying in a perpetual coma against your will, that's perfectly okay. But getting rescued by a kiss that makes you awake again, that's bad.
Well, because she didn't give permission.
She didn't give permission to be put to sleep either.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying I support her or not, but that's the idea.
Kiss.
This is probably one of the. It's probably one problematic thing. But
if you think about it, she did have a chaperone.
I mean, Snow White, if it was done today, would not have that scene.
That's stupid. I
get the intention, but out of all the things, that one's a little misplaced. But I guess I don't
consider anything else problematic with the film, so to speak. But
so, Tammy, do you think that this kissing scene is a little rapey?
No, when he kissed her. That was him realizing that there's more to being a boy, more to life than being a boy is the way I took it. He looked at her, he fell in love.
Okay. And sometimes it indeed is a cigar.
But in any case, he basically becomes a woke person as he realizes that his happy thought is him becoming a father. And that's when we get that great shot of him shooting up into the sky and everyone's saying, "Oh, it's Pan! It's Peter Pan!" And
you missed a little thing that I wanted to go back to real quick, Dave.
Okay.
When you said he picked up the baseball, he actually looked in the water and first saw himself, but young. And that's when he started looking, and then he looked for a few minutes and saw himself young, and then he picked up the baseball. I just wanted to go back to that for a minute.
Not a problem.
Go ahead.
Well, that is the thing,
You missed the obvious joke, which is that Peter gets happy thoughts and he starts to rise.
Wow, I can't believe I missed that. I'm pretty good at that stuff.
This is what we need Mo here for.
Right, or you make a comment about grabbing life by the balls.
I've got an even worse one coming up in the climax that most of you probably not even thought of, but it's coming.
Well, that is the climax after.
Well, that's the climax. You're the most happy moment. The climax.
Well,
Okay.
well, after this, we basically get the whole Rufio bringing the sword to him, saying, "You are the Pan, and you can fly." You can fight and you can.
I felt much more emotion at this scene than I remembered as a child, and that was really cool.
It's very inspirational.
Yeah.
Well, out of all the scenes with the Lost Boys in the beginning, again, it takes us a while to kind of get to the important stuff, but the important stuff that's in there, which is the, if any of you think that this guy ain't Peter Pan crossed the line, then that gets paid off here, and it's, so that the drama of that moment is paid off, and that's effective.
That was the most important Lost Boys scene actually out there in the early scenes.
I did like that training montage. Gotta lose 1 million pounds. And it's like, yeah.
Reach on down and touch your toes. How long since you looked at those?
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was great. That
Just
was
like, stop
definitely-
rubbing it in, kid.
That was definitely kids' thoughts on training, and he looks like he's to lose 1 million pounds and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely.
Just gotta run the
definitely
montage song. Simple as that.
Yeah.
He did pretty good for 3 days.
Yeah, I thought so. But ultimately, we get that whole Julia Roberts scene where she wishes herself to be what is it? Human size,
big size. So she
big size.
Kiss him.
Okay, so she had a Tom Hanks moment, but ultimately,
that could have been cut.
Yeah, I mean that seems a bit odd. I mean, I get it insofar as
it makes sense.
It does make sense.
It does.
She was in love with him.
Those, I know.
A lot of the things we're kind of
those...
cracking on in this movie are things that work fine in this movie. So I'm a little perplexed as to why people are taking issue with
Well, I agree that this needed to stay in for multiple reasons.
It's not even really. Yeah, like it's not even like a lot of the. Mostly, what I'm thinking of is like certain scenes that either just go on too long, or maybe they could have been communicated in a more economical way. But I do get why conceptually they're there. Even this one, it's a little bit odd, but at the same time, like I get why it's there because it's attempting to make her character pay off. I always do feel kind of sorry for Tinkerbell as a character because she's always kind of doomed to be the other woman. And, in here, it does pay off a little bit more because that is her big wish that she could be, a real love for him. And she does love him dearly. But, even given that she can't, even given that she's larger in that moment, he still.
Well, since she was the first woman in his life. Since she was the first woman in his life, for a long time, other than his mother, I can imagine that it kind of relationship isn't exactly the healthiest.
Well, yeah, but plus, when she kisses him, he just goes Mara, like he just thinks of his wife. Like he doesn't think of Tinkerbell just kiss me. He thinks of his wife. I mean, he didn't think that with the mermaids, but he did with Tinkerbell.
And you'd think that the real Tinkerbell would get.
He didn't have a chance to talk with the mermaids.
Yeah,
the
but
mermaids, there was a little.
He wasn't thinking about his wife. He was thinking Forrest.
Yeah, well, the mermaids was a little bit different because they were giving him air and stuff like that. But my favorite shot in the movie is actually when he looks out over the cliff and to the pirate ship and he's like, I have to go, I have a plan. And then of course another, potentially dirty joke there is, what is a Tinkerbell? You gotta come. She was ready to.
I'm ready to come.
Well, in any case, that's when we get the. I think that's pretty much when we get the moment where Hook is trying to give his Peter's son his first pirate earring.
Or piercing with that hook. He's being used as
brace yourself because this is going to hurt
a lot.
A whole freaking lot.
That's when they get that whole silhouette cut out of the ship. That's another moment that kind of comes straight from the animated film because he did that one when he first when you first see him clash with Hook. And
is that in the book? I never read the book, so
I'm not necessarily sure. I don't think I read the book.
I don't remember if it was. One thing I'll say real quick about the book, I've only read it once. It's been probably 4 or 5, maybe longer years. But the Disney film, the animated film, is very, very close plot-wise to the book. But the tone is very different. Peter is wilder and a little bit more of a jerk in the book. And the movie definitely makes it a little more kid-friendly, if you will. The book has a more mature vibe to it.
Well,
But, yeah.
Their version of Peter Pan and their version of Alice in Wonderland both were very much in the spirit of cartoons that were prominent at the time. And cartoons, I mean, like lots of slapstick, high energy, that kind of stuff. They're very, very funny. Really great comedic timing, but very obviously of that period, of that style of animation.
Not to mention, and I will say this is one of the biggest. I see why, because they probably would have had to pay an arm and a leg to Disney, and they probably didn't want to. But the crocodiles theme is one of the best themes from my childhood, and it disappointed me so much that it didn't show up in the movie.
Yeah, originally this film was originally in development it was originally in development at Disney, and then it got passed to Paramount, and then finally to TriStar. So there might have been Disney is making a live action film called Peter Pan. And
more than likely, it's going to be like a lot of their. It's going to be a lot like a lot of their other live action offerings. I think is going to be one of those. Hey, we're going to do a live action version of the cartoon. With some adjustments and maybe some big names and maybe we'll throw something in there for
and maybe not do the whole "What Makes the Red Man Red" song. Please don't.
I think they should do that as the whole thing. That should be the entire thing. It's dedicated to that
song. Bring on the cancel culture. Here we go.
Matter of fact, they should also have the crows make an appearance there from Dumbo.
Just cover off all the bases and have "Song of the South" thrown in there as well.
Let's not say we did. But in any case, let's roll forward on the plot line. Peter shows up, and he basically comes up the stairs, offers his hand to his son, and his son refuses. And this is kind of where the fight begins. And you basically get this moment of where he flies over towards his son and says, "You know what my happy thought was? It was you." Mm-hmm. And somewhere in here, that's right. They basically net him down, and that's when he rises up and screams, "Bangarang!" Yep. And that's when oh my God, there were more Lost Boys than I saw in the original beginning that showed up at this pirate gathering. Hey,
that's when all the extras came in.
Right.
But what did you all think about this whole fighting scene? Because I really love that chunky. I love his character.
Yeah.
I swear to God, was he in the big green?
Are you talking about the kid that did like the big boulder going down the stairs move, basically? Yeah, I love that.
As a child, this has got to be one of the most fun scenes. But as an adult, I could see, like, if you're really saying things need to be cut from the film, this would be one of those scenes that you would cut short and focus more on the duel. But again, looking at it from a child's perspective, it's much more important there.
The
Oh hell!
climax has a lot of false stops, I should say, a lot of fake outs, like moments where you think, okay, that's the end of the climax, and then it keeps going. Okay, that's the end of the climax. Okay, then it keeps going, and you're like, okay, all right, But
And it moves like
and
on
again,
and off the ship, and
yeah, it just there a lot of moments where it just kind of goes on and on and on. Now the actual duel is pretty good, and it has some really good lines. Like the to die would be a great adventure. Death is the only adventure you have left. Like that's
But
great stuff.
we
Like
really
I
do
say-
have to mention Rufio's death.
Yeah.
I thought it was actually rather good there. Where at first he's not like going to do it, but then Peter has to go rescue his daughter, and then he's like, "Heck yeah, I get to fight Hook," and you could see that excitement there.
Looky, I got hooky.
Well, and I the other thing that was pointed out was when Rufio actually dies, and then the very next shot, Hook, no, and he gets like wind blown in his face for some reason, even though there was no wind to be
and
had.
his dying words were, you know what I wish? I wish that that I had a father like you.
Right.
Oh.
And
that was very
It does
sad.
bring it home a little bit to some of the darker aspects because, I mean, they were killing Lost Boys left and right. If you listen to how they're talking earlier on, if you pay attention, they were killing them all the time. They were hunting them down and doing this. So you actually get to see one of them die. It kind of brings that home a little bit more.
Yeah, it's good because this needs some pathos to it. Because I mean, Peter Pan as a concept has pathos as well. And I think that the dialogue that they have during the duel, even though again the duel itself, good as it is, it does kind of go on a little bit. They have some good exchanges, and then the unintentionally dirty line that they have, which my friends and I in college would laugh about, which was I remember you being a lot bigger to a 10-year-old. I'm huge.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, before I even thought of it as a dirty line, I just liked that line. It's like, I remember you being a lot bigger.
Right.
I when I first saw that, I interpreted that as, it's like, didn't you used to be harder to beat?
Yeah, which, I mean, that's what it's intended to mean. Obviously, it's just our dirty adult minds go to all kinds of
when
places.
you're a kid, you don't think of it that way. Exactly, you think of it the way. And speaking of the innocence of kids, another
guy, though, so
right
makes sense.
Which actually was another reason you don't think Dustin Hoffman, because he's not a tall guy, and I didn't really read about this. I know they must have been using forced perspective and probably platform shoes.
And also, I mean, Robin Williams wasn't a big guy either.
Neither of them were tall, but Robin Williams was 2 inches taller than Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah,
right.
But with platform shoes, he could easily beat that. So there you go.
Plus he's got that hat and the hair. It makes him look a lot bigger. That's and the mustache. We've hardly even mentioned the mustache.
Ironically,
Hook. The whole point of him as a character, as we see actually in the ending of their duel, is that his humongously envious hair is in fact a wig.
Right.
And
give me back my dignity.
His mustache and his eyebrows and stuff. We never see them as being fake, but they very well could be.
Oh, we do see.
I do like how the film harkens back to the animated film with his mustache, because there's that moment when his mustache twitches to the clock tick.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. And I was going to say we don't see necessarily that the mustache and eyelashes are. I mean, you know what I mean, eyebrows are fake, but we do see the glorious scenes where we get to see Smee is using his own earwax to help his I do love that. And I do want to mention with that whole fight scene, one moment that I was like, again, we come back to Amber Scott and Maggie. She's in there. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. But then when he comes and she gets this Daddy.
My dad's Peter Pan.
Yes, I just love that moment. That like, holy crap!
How much
the-
therapy does that kid need, knowing that her dad is Peter Pan?
See, me in the fight scene.
Therapy.
See, me in the fight scene when Peter Pan is right in front of that chicken egg throwing super soaker. I thought that part was pretty hilarious, where he was like, "Who's chicken?"
Chicken.
And that's
one of pretty gnarly gear in this battle.
The therapy line I just said. That's not one of those things that would hit her right away. That might be one of those, like, she's 35 and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, my dad's Peter Pan. What the fuck? Just comes out of nowhere.
And then
those weapons were all for toy sales. You know that.
Well, and ultimately,
speaking of weapons for toy sales. So okay, Pan's sword, which I like that it's actually a sword. It's a short sword, but it's a sword and not a knife, a little dagger that he had in the animated film. But so they fight, and then out of nowhere it just sparks, and it's like, okay. But again, would make for a great toy.
Well, I think they did that for extra effect. To be honest, it was. That was a part where I thought, really, because it could just be a loud clash to start it, not just the sparks and everything like that.
I thought it fit with the rest of the scene in that, just because it was all the over the top weapons and everything like that. So yeah, to me it fit the scene pretty well.
It fit.
Ultimately, they end up in front of the croc, which evidently has which you saw in the very beginning when he actually first woke up, but we get to see like this whole stuffed croc that is like the centerpiece of this pirate town. It's basically his monument to the thing, because
they were able to somehow kill it, which is a miracle. They were able to kill it, because looking at that thing, holy crap! It's like a prehistoric crocodile. The thing must have been 50 feet.
And we already know that
dynamite. A Roger Corman movie.
We already know that grenades and dynamite won't work, because we just saw Alligator 2, and that's even bigger.
Right.
If it was an anaconda, then we'd have had to get Jennifer Lopez and Ice Cube on the case.
Oh no!
Well, and the Lost Boys. The Lost Boys don't play fair because they bring all these clocks to tick, and
that was great. It was like his biggest weakness was the clocks.
They just put clocks in his face, and he's like, "No!"
I don't know if we really mentioned earlier the museum, quote unquote, of broken clocks.
Not really.
We did.
We only mentioned the watch being broken there, not the clocks themselves, or how he freaked out when he heard the watch ticking stuff, which was a great scene.
Mm-hmm. But basically, they had made a point of getting rid of all these clocks to like. So clearly Hook has a little bit of a PTSD still involving that ticking crocodile.
Well, I mean, Peter Pan does that. I mean,
you know what other movie
he does the line.
You know what other movie had a crocodile that was ticking? All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Yes, indeed.
I don't remember.
Isn't that the opera singing
crocodile?
I've never seen it. Don't want to.
Well, but the croc was not good at the beginning of that one. It's a crocodile was ticking.
It was probably the crocodile from Hook. They were probably following it.
Right.
It was a dual thing about his fear, and I like how they illustrate it right there for everybody else to hear, where he's taunting him about it. Who's afraid of an old dead croc? but he's very afraid of time ticking away. And that is illustrated even more because not long after that, he reveals the wig, and you can see the aging on him, which
Right.
shows his true fear, growing old and inconsequential. And that to me was great because you could see the anger of Clocks wasn't just about the crocodile, it was about his fear of growing old, his fear of dying.
Yeah.
Even though even though he talked about
And
wanting
at
to
the
die,
same
he really didn't
time-
want to at all.
At the same time, his line that he said twice was, "Death is also the greatest
Yeah.
adventure."
But that was a
Right.
posturing. That's a posturing thing. I mean, you see that in the suicide scene. It's a posturing thing. He only
Well,
says it.
And for me,
Because-
like the scenes that touch on that theme, those are by far the best because that really is at the core of not just Peter Pan, but also Hook. Because, like you said, he doesn't want to grow old, he doesn't want to die, and I mean, he's in a place where it appears that he can't get older than he already is. And he does have a bit of vanity and grandiosity about himself with like the red carpet on the stairs and all that stuff and his hair and all that stuff. So it's like it makes sense why psychologically why he is that way, but
In
also
a
why he
way-
needs a worthy adversary.
In a way, Captain Hook and Peter Ham have always had a bromance going on. You know,
I don't know who Peter Ham is, but
I
I
don't know
said
either.
Peter Pan.
Actually, you know, it's funny you
I like
say
that
that.
concept.
Are
It's
they
funny you
related?
say that because I was reading in the trivia that supposedly Dustin Hoffman and Bob Hoskins had a simultaneous aha moment where they basically said that, oh, well, Hook and Smee are a thing. And apparently they were dissuaded from going all the way down that rabbit hole in the movie, but they really do have sort of a bromance going. In a sense. It's really kind of funny.
maybe a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more than a bromance, but you know yeah, I think there is also one could also read connotations into an older foppish man taking a
Right.
abnormal interest in a young precocious boy.
Right.
But that's a whole other story. But
That would be.
A dandelion.
That's the Michael Jackson version.
Wow.
But in any case, after he says, "Give me my dignity," he basically slashes his arm, and
Yeah.
then he tries to go after him, but Tink gets in the way, and while Tink gets in the way, Robin Williams basically
Well-
takes his hook and stabs it into the croc. And then he's like, okay, what's happening? And the croc basically falls on top of him. You see a cloud of smoke. And then moments later, you hear a...
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
then
actually,
Hook just
no. There
Hook
was
just
actually a pivotal.
appears.
There was actually a pivotal moment right before he gave Hook back the wig, where Peter has him cornered, like he has him at his mercy, and he's thinking about actually dispatching him. And then,
Yeah.
basically his kids come up to him, and Maggie's like, he's just a mean old man without a mommy. And
Yeah.
and Jack's like, yeah, let's go. And he listens. Yeah.
But I do
Yeah, it
like
was,
that. I like that it goes
yeah.
through Peter's head to like actually kill him because like, and
Right.
you buy why he would because like,
Right.
not only did he kidnap his children, but also he said if you did, but he doesn't go there right away because Hook was like you leave and I'll come after them again and your
Yeah.
children's
Yeah, I was
children's all
about to
that
say
stuff.
that's like
So I
You'll-
mean,
you'll
it's
see-
not
false
like
ends.
it came out of nowhere. Yeah,
You'll
so
see
it makes
dagger
sense
signed
because-
letters on the doors of your children's children's children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of makes sense as far as like just end the cycle now. before it gets
Mhm.
worse across the generation. So, but I like that that's not the first place he goes mentally, but he doesn't leave that route unexplored either.
Mhm.
Because I could totally see why he would go there. But I also see why he ultimately doesn't, because he doesn't want to be a murderer in front of not just his children, but the other Lost Boys. But
Mhm.
that part I really like. But the only part that doesn't make sense to me is so the dead stuffed monstrous crocodile falls on him and I guess eats him, even though it's not alive. But they're like, "There's no more Hook.
It's
He's
supposed to
gone." It's like,
be a
where did he
fun.
go?
It's supposed to be a funny moment to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it
And also,
literally,
you could say
it
you
literally moves its head, comes back to life as the spirit.
and also the laws of physics and
Spectrum.
logic are not
Yeah.
100% in Neverland, as we've already
Yeah.
mentioned. There's a lot of magic and a lot of oddity in Neverland. So the idea that the croc could come back from beyond the grave to get his final revenge, it doesn't
mean,
seem
shoot.
too far out there.
No,
This is a land where we're
I
getting
guess
our
not.
sustenance from imaginary food, for God's
Well,
sake.
that's fair enough. Now, the one interesting thing that I really loved in the 2003 version that I think was from the book, if I recall, I haven't seen it outside of it, so tell me if it's in other adaptations. But the idea that Neverland, the weather of Neverland was intrinsically tied to Peter's emotions. So, like when he was away,
Hmm.
it was winter, and then when he returned, everything thawed because he was back, and it
I
also
don't think
corresponded
that.
with his mental state.
Well,
I
there
don't
was
think
a
that
moment
was in
when
the
they
book.
said it was raining, like when he first started, remembering who he was, and they said it's raining, like it meant it was a good thing or something that it was raining. So I think you're right. It has something to do with the weather is tied to his feelings.
Where are we? I had to step
With
away
that
for a
scene.
minute.
I think we're finishing up the final
Yeah.
confrontation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Can we move her along here? I feel like we've gone on a bit
Yeah.
too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately, he basically after Hook goes wherever he goes.
Yeah, he just vanishes into the crocodile's mouth, which is
Yeah.
Yeah.
the ghost of the crocodile gets him, I guess.
Yeah, it
Very
made no
strange.
sense.
mhm. It made perfect sense. What are you talking
It
about?
made no sense in the
We
fact
get
that
it,
made
Dane.
perfect
You
sense.
hate the movie. Damn.
It made as much sense
I
to
already,
say
I already
Alien
said I
Wonderland or
didn't fit
anything
the
else.
movie.
So so once that happens, yeah.
Once that
So
happens, he basically sends his children off flying home, but then he's left with who he's going to give the pan sword, and he
right.
moves the sword around
And he
the
picks
now
Thudbutt.
smaller crowd of Lost Boys, and he picks that. Go
And he
ahead.
picks
picks
Thudbutt, like the
Thudbutt.
chubby kid.
Yeah.
But
I thought he was going to pick the little
What
kid
a
that recognized him as Peter Pan first.
yeah.
That's who I would have
Well,
picked.
and what a flattering name, Thudbutt.
Who
Although
am I
then
going to
then
look after? Never bugs,
bugs.
the little ones. I love that little line.
Yeah.
then again, I don't know
Bugs.
this to be true, but then again, with a character like that, you know that if he did decide to do the convention circuit, I'm sure he would have a huge line, though.
One line I thought was interesting, kind of ominous. Oddly enough, even more ominous to me as a child is when he's flying away. It's like disbelieve, and you hear the last Lost Boy line was like, "That was a great game," and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think to myself that I don't take as much, but I felt that was more ominous. That there was a lot of stuff in this film that has a potentially deeper meaning that you could say is a delusion or him doing something else, and that's one line that's just kind of eerie. Yeah, it's kind of lighthearted if you look at it on the
They're
surface.
eldritch
Well,
There's something
beings.
more
to
to it.
me, I took it as the kid just he's that small of a kid, yet he just thought it was all a game.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a playful thing. I mean,
But I get what Brandon's saying though. The idea that games, as fun as they are, they do have to end ultimately.
yeah, but then there's that thought of growing up again, and
Right.
Neverland boys don't want to grow up.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and when everybody gets back to the real world, you have the street sweeper who's may or
mhm,
may not be Smee, and
Yeah.
it does kind of deliberately blur the lines of reality
having
for
trouble with the missus.
yeah.
They will if you
So
watch
so
over them.
you could totally interpret the movie as Peter Banning just got piss ass drunk and just slept in the street all
Right.
night.
Like
He
the
could have
Wizard
been
of
playing a
Oz, it's
game of
just a
street urchins, and they were like,
Uh,
"This is a great game."
like the
it
Wizard
could
of Oz was
it
just
could
a
have been
dream.
an earlier, a later adaptation of The Taming of the Shrew.
Huh.
Well, and of course, that's when you have your Scrooge your Scrooge Christmas morning
Scrooge
thing
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
he's like, "Yes, I do appreciate my life. I'm grateful for
Hey,
my
Yes.
children.
you
Good
have to
He
father,
admit
yada
finds.
yada."
the unsung hero of the movie is his assistant who kept calling him all throughout the
Yeah.
night and didn't give up. So it's like,
Right.
hey,
Wanted
good for
that deal
you,
to go
man.
through.
I guess
Well,
so.
Ah,
let's
you been holding this long?
let's bring it to the end where
Yeah.
we have him waking up, and he basically fools around outside. We see Nana. We see the
Right.
phone. He brings the phone up with him to the balcony. He gets in. He gets to the window. He knocks on the window, and they let him in. And he basically talks to Brad, and he's like, here's what air feels like. uh, and of course Moira's like, who are you? You know, but a little bit before that, that's when when she wakes up, and she doesn't exactly realize the kids are there yet.
Yeah.
But Wendy comes
Hey,
into the
guys.
room. The kids are.
I have to go, so I'm just gonna
Yeah.
snap off my parts of the last couple segments. So this has pretty
Okay.
good effects in my opinion and amazing music. Overall,
Mhm.
it's a wonderful movie. I think my favorite scene is the existential crisis of Captain Hook. You know, don't you try and stop me, shmee, stop me.
Good deal.
What? And yeah, this is a great movie, but I gotta go.
Okay.
Right.
Well, you have a good evening.
Yeah.
Sorry it went on so long.
Have a good night.
Have a good one.
In any case,
All right.
we have Wendy coming in, and
Mhm.
the kids sit up, and they're like, "Mommy!" So, what do
Yeah.
y'all think about this ending here?
It's
I
a
like
good
when the
ending.
kids.
Yeah.
I love when the kids come in, like how you. I mean, there's always that theme of Neverland and forgetting, and how they almost don't recognize their own mother as they're talking.
Right.
They talked almost detached, and
She
I
looks
do
like
like
an
that
angel.
first, and then
Neverland makes you forget. So
Yeah.
and then the
Well,
waking up afterwards.
this
Very nice scene.
that whole climax, no, sorry, epilogue. Excuse me. The whole epilogue there, I think could have been trimmed also, like with the whole, she looks like an angel, like that whole thing. It's like, I don't know, there are a lot of little things here and there all throughout the movie. That like, you don't need that, you don't need that, you don't need that, and you could have really trimmed this down to like 2 hours at the most,
But
maybe an hour
why?
and
It
a
was
half of
great as it
your.
was.
I don't know. It's like there's so many moments where it's like I get it. You don't need
You
to
could
like.
add on to the movie too, but I mean,
But but I do like the bit with Smee there because like you could buy it as either he
Mhm.
is maybe that's his undercover job and that's how he figured out all the stuff about Peter, or indeed there could just be a blurring of the lines of reality, that maybe Peter really just got really fucking drunk and slept out in the street all night. Which would be that
Well,
would be really
even
funny.
though if it does lead to positive change, then it's the same
Yeah.
outcome either way. You do have the there's that nice little moment where Moira gets the line. Wendy comes in, she's like, I see them so often in my dreams that even when I wake up, they're still there. And then, but then that's when the kids decide to come over and, mommy, and that was a good, but I do like where Peter comes back in and Jack comes like, excuse me, do you have an appointment? And then, and then, of course, they open it up. And that was a callback to the beginning where Peter freaked out when they had the window open. He's like, what did I always tell you about this window?
Always leave it open.
Always leave it open. It's a little cheesy, but it's a good callback.
Yeah, leave it open and catch hypothermia. That's a
exactly.
Yeah, as cold as that place was, I wouldn't want to leave it open.
And we've already mentioned the ending line several times, which is
we didn't mention.
Well, and of course, Toodles gets his marbles
losing
back.
his marbles. Yeah,
I never lost
losing
my
his
marbles.
marbles thing.
Didn't lose them after
Which
all.
they had 3 variations of that whole joke there, which it was okay, but I do like him as an old man kind of rediscovering the ability to fly and stuff. I think that part is good,
Right.
Now, as
and it does fit into the whole thing.
Looking at this as the ability to cut it to make it more of an adult-related film.
I did want to say something. That old man who played Toodles reminded me of the guy who played Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. That was Arthur Mallet, and he has been in quite a bit of stuff. But yeah, I could see what you mean about Uncle Billy. Yeah.
I could say... And I like to say, I could say Toodles could be cut out entirely. If you really are talking about making cuts to make it more of a
but nobody's making
adult-centric
cuts.
film. Because again, the making the cuts is to make it less of a kid-friendly film and more of an adult-friendly film.
I'm not
Toodles is an original. He's an original character. Like and they make the point in the movie of him being the original one that Wendy brought back and found a home for. So there is a narrative purpose to having him there, I think.
Oh, there is, but again, when we're talking about making cuts to make it
blasphemy.
I agree.
Well, see, okay. Well, actually, talking about cutting Lost Boys. This is, I think, one of the reasons why I was a little disappointed was from that cartoon. Again, what was it? Peter Pan and the Pirates, or whatever it was. My favorite Lost Boy from the cartoon isn't in the movie, so that's it was a slightly, I think it was always my favorite as a kid. I don't remember why. I just remember being disappointed that he wasn't in the film. So,
you could have done a lot too. If you went further away from the child-friendly aspect.
Yeah,
you could cut a lot from it. You could cut most of the Lost Boy out. You could have taken a lot of the more eccentric pirate scenes out and left it as more of a dark and gritty feel. But again, it wouldn't be the same movie at the same time.
No, it wouldn't.
And that's the thing is, a lot of the stuff that you would think needs to be cut, it would be a totally different movie than what it is.
It would. I mean, that's why
it wouldn't be a bad movie. It would be totally bad movie.
I don't think it would be a bad movie. It'd just be a different movie.
I think it. Yeah, I think what I'm talking about it would definitely be a different movie. I think it again, the appeal of this thing, I think, is in some of those 90s kid movie kind of scenes that kind of makes it what it is, for better or for worse. I think what I'm talking about would amplify some of the psychological aspects of it, but would it necessarily appeal to people? I'm not sure. Because again, this was not a critical success, but it did make a pretty good amount of money at the box office, and it has
And
had a
it
cultural
is a
legacy.
cult favorite of many
Yeah.
Big
people.
time. Big time. And I will say it is a pretty standout movie in the grand pantheon of Peter Pan related media. So,
Right.
you know.
And again, if you look at all the potential, like what ifs or what might have been, there were a lot more than usual with this one. And a lot of them are fascinating. What if Nick Castle had taken it and directed the film originally? What if they had continued with the idea of doing a Michael Jackson musical? What if they had gone with the guy who very nearly got the part of Peter, which was Kevin Kline? You know, what if I'd actually read that two of the people who came really close to playing Hook would have been Donald Sutherland and David Bowie. Both of those are fascinating ideas, but none of those would be this movie. And
But if Darren Aronofsky wrote and directed this,
Oh, now we're talking.
If what happened?
Darren Aronofsky.
Oh well, I don't think that was even on the potential discussion.
Well, he wasn't even a thing yet at that time.
No,
not
yet.
That would have been great, though. But
no, I'm talking about things that almost happened.
David Bowie as Hook would have been great, but might it have been a little too similar to Jareth the Goblin King? Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, now it's interesting you mentioned Michael Jackson. He very, very nearly did it because, as we all know, Michael Jackson was so heavily intertwined with the story of Peter Pan in terms of,
in fact,
someone who was that big of a fan, and he made his own Neverland Ranch, etc.
Yes,
but he didn't. he didn't do it because he didn't like the idea of Peter Pan having grown up, having forgotten his childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
anyway,
I think this is where we should probably go into production. And talking about the production. So, what did we all think about the production?
Oh, I loved it.
It was
the imagination.
The visual effects surprisingly hold up pretty well. Even some of the green screen compositing holds up better for a film of this period than you might think it would. I do like the fact that most of it is practical sets, but I do not like the fact that they look so obviously like sets. Like they don't look like, for the most part, they don't really look like real places where people would actually live. They look too obviously manufactured, too theme parkish for my taste. And and there is a logic to how to build sets that are fantastical, but they still look like real people would actually live there.
Now, granted, the real world sets look quite solid.
They do.
So I say real world, but anyway, it's kind of a similar thing to a criticism that I used to have until I decided to just run with it. I used to have a similar criticism with The Princess Bride, but then I thought about it as it's basically a fairy tale it's basically a storybook being read that's a fairy tale. So if it looks a little clunky at times, it doesn't really matter. And this one kind of, I feel like it's kind of like that. I used to think of it that way, but I
think your thinking is correct. Although I would say I think this one is trying to be just a little bit more sincere than The Princess Bride is, which is not to say that The Princess Bride is insincere, but I think it's more deliberately tongue-in-cheek, a little bit more deliberately.
Which is why I don't give this one as much of a pass as I do Princess Bride, but it's a similar concept. And there was a time where I would have held both movies accountable at that. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean.
I give this a full pass.
The Princess Bride hits that right balance of it's tongue-in-cheek enough for the adults to appreciate, but kids would really
Mhm.
be sincerely into it because I was when I saw it as a kid. I didn't see the levels of irony and the levels of campiness, like intentional campiness. But like with this, I would argue that it is trying to be a little bit more sincere. But when it looks like an
Yeah.
obvious set, it really looks like an obvious set. Now it's well designed. It just looks like a set. It doesn't look like an actual pirate village or whatever it is.
Now,
or,
on the visual,
the-
on the visual effects, my understanding was that was one of the things that Spielberg was most dissatisfied with, and I do think that they could have aged better, but they aged decently. I mean, I could
Look
see
at it.
why he was dissatisfied,
See,
but I don't think he needs to be embarrassed.
I like
y'all,
that. Go ahead.
I think y'all are looking at it from the wrong angle. Y'all are looking at it again from an adult angle. Try and look at the movie as it was meant for like 7 to 12, and look at the sets from that aspect, which is very hard if you haven't seen the film at that level.
They're kind of
But
cool.
from a 7 to 12-year-old, a theme parkish, cartoony setting works better.
Yes,
because it resonates
Yeah.
more with the
Well,
child. I think it's
I
more
would
perfect.
argue
If it was darker and grittier, it would
it's
not
less-
resonate as well as the children. I don't think it's.
it's
I have
less,
always loved.
my criticism when I bring that up is mostly my criticism of that is mostly of the pirate village itself. The Lost Boys area being a little bit more of like you know how like every kid show, whenever there's a tree house, how it's always like super decked out with all kinds of technology
Yeah.
that no kid could ever afford. It kind of reminds me of that, but like as a kid, every kid wants a tree house like that.
Yeah.
And so, and the Lost Boys area, that kind of has that same feel. So I give that one a little bit more of a pass because I believe that kids in that fantastical world, they probably would want to create that kind of environment for themselves. So I get that part, but it's just more so like with the Pirate Village. So what? It's a bunch of moored ships, on the land there, and they, I guess, made a little settlement out of it, which that would require a lot of work to get all the ships up there out onto the land where they're not being used, and it's just, I don't know, the logic
one
of
thing
it
I-
is a little
Design of-
strained, but
And the design of Captain Hook's ship, I love
Yeah.
that design.
Uh,
And his
the skull
quarters
at the
are,
end,
are
Tan-
really
Tan-
nice. Yeah.
Tammy, you really liked that bed, didn't you?
Yeah, I liked his bed. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Well,
the bed came down from above.
His actual quarters.
Yeah. And how they actually
I saw
use that
that.
like old school like ship's wheel to wheel it up and down. Yeah. And I like the part.
His
overall
quarters
design
were
for that, yeah.
humongous.
Yeah.
His
I love
quarters were
when Smee was
humongous. I
put
think
away his.
much more so than a real pirate ship necessarily
Yeah.
would be. But again, Hook does kind of have a vaunted sense of himself, so maybe his would really be that big.
Right. And I was going to say that you can see that when you see like his shoe collection, where he has all those spiffed out shoes that look exactly the same.
Which brings you back to the whole foppish dandelion-ish, because in a sense, Hook has always been had some kind of Femalian-ness about him. So he had a gigantic shoe collection, which is something that you would think would be in a female's collection than an actual male's collection.
What about his dressing table with all the mirrors?
Right.
Well, it all plays to his narcissism at the end.
But in any case, I think we've done enough on production, don't you think?
Well, one last note. I have always loved, and I will probably always love, when Peter kind of falls into the Lost Boys hideout. First of all, he falls into a snowbank, and you got the penguins, And I just love that little touch. But this time was, I think, the first time I ever watched it where he gets up and brushes like, oh, snow. And I'm sitting there thinking, he comments on how weird the snow is, but not the penguins. And I just thought that was kind of amusing.
Well, penguins are
Well,
riding home in the
that
snow.
actually maybe that actually is a subtle nod to the fact that that Neverland is in a deep freeze prior to his return. You know, and they never explicitly say
Maybe.
that, but I mean that idea. Maybe it's an homage to that idea.
Maybe.
Hmm.
But let's go into I think we mentioned the music, but the music is done by John Williams,
Yeah.
which really, honestly, it's an amazing score. But Kroll and I are amazed that nobody mentioned Star Wars in John Williams, because that's one thing that John Williams
What
was
do you
well
mean? I
known
mean, that's
for.
like that's these. What do you mean? No,
Oh, Williams.
that's like nobody. I don't know how you could. How could you not mention Star Wars? Because that's like
That's what I
the
said
thing
to
he's
Dave
known
was,
for.
how can that
On
not be
top
mentioned?
of everything.
Someone said that, you know, their favorite.
Well, I don't know what you're.
Was another movie.
Well, earlier
I think that was
when Randy.
Dustin.
Earlier, when Randy mentioned that
Randy,
Jurassic
yeah.
Park was his favorite score from him, he was we were just surprised that Star Wars wasn't mentioned.
Yeah.
Like touching
John Williams cannibalizes
Right.
himself so much.
Maybe he meant. He really does, but maybe he meant his favorite John Williams Steven Spielberg collaboration.
Yeah.
Could be.
Because like because John Williams did plenty of scores for non Spielberg films, one of which would have been Star Wars, of course. And Star Wars has by far and away the best film score ever written. There's no
Right,
question.
that's what I'm saying.
But
Like,
I
not
do
even-
think
don't
in
know.
terms of
Not even just being a Star
Pretty
Wars.
close.
I did. Well, I do think in terms of the Spielberg collaborations, if we're just going to keep it there, it is a good score, and I really do love the main theme, the Flight to Neverland theme, which actually, one thing I noticed this time is the low choir. Ooh, you know, like that was like, oh man, he totally ripped off the Emperor's theme from Return of the Jedi a little bit. But again, he can cannibalize himself all he wants. But you know, I did
Right.
notice that this time. But no,
It does make it hard
a
to
good
keep
one
the
out of the
scores
Spielberg
separate sometimes.
collaborations.
I
That
think
is
at
true.
this point, at this point we should go around and talk favorites. So, Forrest, I wonder if you have a favorite scene from this particular film. Is he alive?
Forrest?
Still with us?
You awake?
Yeah, barely. Yeah, barely.
So, what is a favorite scene from this particular film?
Great. Oh man, there's so many moments from here that I love. But probably when Peter first introduces himself to the Lost Boys, that he as a lawyer, and Rufio raises his sword and shouts, "Kill the lawyer!"
I'm not that kind of lawyer.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Is that it, or you going with that one?
Yes.
Okay. Moving over to Tammy. If there was a favorite scene that you could take from this movie, what would it be?
It's gonna sound weird, but one of my favorite scenes is the end when he gets eaten by the crocodile. I just love that
Well,
when it comes
we have
down.
always, when we discussed alligator too, you know, we went into how we enjoyed the guy being eaten by the alligator. So, you know, we all like that sort of thing. Alligator crocodiles eating the bad guy.
That was one of my. That was
So
one of
what
my
you're-
favorite scenes, and I
what-
love the little girl singing her little song. I thought that was just precious.
It was.
What you're saying is that gratuitous animal death is fun.
That's right.
Damn
is.
Stoughton. Kroll, if there was a favorite moment that you could take from this movie, what would it be?
I definitely have to go with the name calling. He started out a little slow.
Oh, the dinner
Some of the
scene.
things he said was funny. We touched on it a little bit, and then right into the food fight. That whole scene right there was just absolutely great. He finally started to get into it. Like at first he was kind of a little bit funny stuff, that real world stuff. The kids probably knew nothing about, like the chemistry teacher and stuff like that. I laughed a little, but when he really started to insult him, and when he said Peter Pan envy, I laughed because obviously he was very envious of Peter Pan right from the beginning. So I'd have to say that's my favorite scene. I mean, there's definitely some great scenes throughout the movie, but that's definitely favorite scene.
Okay. Moving over to Brandon. What if there was a favorite scene? What would you take from this film?
I really liked where he finally got the memory of him being Peter Pan up to the point where he meets with Rufio again and follows up the scene with the line where even Rufio is there. Just the depth of the scene, the emotional reactions by the actors. There's a lot of subtleness to it that I missed as a kid that as an adult I appreciated a lot more.
Okay. How about you, Dane? If there was a favorite scene that you could take from this film, what would it be?
When Peter is fully remembering who he is and to me why he chose to grow up. I think that's when the drama's at its strongest, despite some of the plot holes, some of the logic problems. I do think that what's good in there really gets the chance to shine.
Jake, if there was a favorite scene that you could take from this film, what would it be?
That is really, really hard. I do want to mention a couple of quotes that we didn't, that I just really loved. And I'm probably going to say generally, the interactions between Smee and Hook probably are going to be my top ones. But like when we first meet Hook, you get that first of all a nod to Good Morning Vietnam, where Smee's like, "Good morning Neverland."
Yeah.
Here he is, the cunning kingfish, the bad barracuda, a man so deep he's almost unfathomable, which is a great witty line, but the pirates just stare at him. A man so quick he's even fast asleep, and the pirates all cheer. He knows how to meet them where they're at. And actually, one of my, and this is good again. I don't know what it is, but I've always loved it. The way that Hook talks about good form and bad form, why he's so hung up on that. Good. And there was after he has his little tete-a-tete with Tinkerbell, he's like, "Hear me, men, for reasons of good form, I have decided that the so-called Pan will return in 3 days to commit the arbitrament of the sword." Smee, translate. Yeah. In 3 days, we're gonna have a war. The way the two of them work together, they are a well-oiled machine, which might be a interesting statement given some of the other things we said. But I'm probably gonna, if I really had to narrow it down, I might actually agree with Dustin of Hook's existential crisis. Yeah.
Well, the good form stuff to me made perfect sense relative to. I mean, when I hear good form, I think of like fencing. I think of a dual.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it makes sense in that context.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to harken back to the moment when Toodles was woofing along with the dog and came to the realization of Hook being back. that whole nightmare scenario is kind of like what sets the movie. And then I think I also like the part where Rufio comes to Peter Pan and is like, you are the Pan. Like he finally admits that everything that he's gone through, that he really is the Pan that everyone one was saying that he was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that whole scene there was awesome. And I think that's pretty much the epitome of the Lost Boys, you know, the fact that that their lost hero has come back and realized who he is, and that is a high moment in the film. But I love the food fight. Unfortunately, there's a lot of likes, so I'm gonna have to go with my favorite moment is also the croc eating eating Hook. I mean that to me, I just get it. It is a perfect ending to Hook. To me, but I do harken back to what you said, Jake. That crocodile theme was needed.
Yeah, like instead of belching, if they had just played a few bars of that theme, that would have been just such a great send off. Exactly.
Yeah, I could see that. But in any case, I think that's all that we have for tonight. So why don't we go ahead and do our outros? So, Forrest, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. I'm Forrest Bennett. I'm an independent film producer based in Long Island, New York. And I've always got something going on in the pipeline.
Cool. Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Dane Kyle, independent filmmaker and now film educator / YouTuber. Out of Charlotte, North Carolina, I did my series Oztober on my channel Dangerous Arts, DANEJUROUS Arts, and I'm currently prepping the next series, which will be April in Wonderland, set to debut in April of 2022.
Nice. Let's go over to you, Kroll, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, as you know, I'm disabled, so I don't work. So I basically watch movies and TV shows, read books, play video games, and talk to you guys about movies, which I absolutely love to do.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Tammy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Right now I'm kind of in the same boat as Paul. I'm not working, but with David being my fiance, I've gotten into your discussions. This is new for me, and I've enjoyed it so far. And learned a lot about movies being around him, and it's been interesting. And then my favorite, I do my own collecting of things, and my pastime in the summer is car shows with my 1972 Grand Prix.
Awesome. Heading over to you, Jacob. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. I'm Kotobukijake. I am the co-host of SeptumSin versus the World, where I'll let him tell you a little more about it. But basically, we cover all kinds of stuff about physical media, and we did a fun little discussion last night where we were talking about some of the shows that we would love to see produced that unfortunately have not been. That we had Dave on with us, and Septum's wife joined us, and had some good talk. And at the end of the month, we'll be talking about Penguin Drum, very intriguing anime on our anime anticlimax feature. I am myself a collector fan of many different types of media. I like to try to be involved in various projects. I have a short film that I put a little bit of money into on Kickstarter that has officially gone through, and a couple more where I'm waiting to see. And also helped fund the American redub of Dirty Pair. So, I'm trying to get a little more active in that, as well as trying to build my own business, which is a native plant nursery, and all that, plus more jobs, one of which I will be getting up for in the morning. Yay. Keeps me pretty busy.
So, Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
We're on SeptumSin versus the world, all about the physical media. Jake filled us in about the discussion. And other than pickup videos, we're not doing a heck of a lot otherwise. But we do have an anime discussion coming up at the end of the month. That'll be good. And maybe some content later on as time goes by.
So what movie are we doing next week before I go into my whole spiel?
Well, I'm sure Dustin would be happy because it's his pick, the 1980 classic Maniac. Quite the mustache in that film. So we'll all be looking forward to that.
Very cool. So my name is David Straggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for joining us on this long journey tonight into this particular film. It was a blast. Although I'm sure it didn't exactly blow us out of the water, but we we definitely
It was an hour longer than the movie.
We definitely had fun
You
doing
can say
it.
we got hooked.
But I moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I go on about my own video pickups and own video reviews. But as far as anything, I have an interview coming up this week with a starting, not starting out, a independent film director that produces behind Whiskey Drankers. He is the director of Arm Wrestling Roulette, as well as a new film called, I believe it's called Inheritance. I have it right here. It is called Inheritance, yes. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be Thursday night. And then this coming weekend, Kroll and possibly Tammy, along with Boris, are going to be discussing Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. So that's going to be entertaining as well. So definitely keep a lookout for that. And hopefully just like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure. So good times.
Bangarang.
Bangarang, yes.
Bangarang.
Good night, Neverland.